Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we drift into the echoing dark of the steppe, where the horizon bleeds into black and the wind smells faintly of iron. You hear it first before you see it, the distant rumble, like a heartbeat magnified across miles of grass. It isn't thunder, it's the sound of 1,000 hooves tromming against the bones of the world. The Mongols are moving again, and every vibration seems to shake loose an ancient secret about how they built not just an army, but a human breed designed for war. You probably won't survive this history lesson with your comfort intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The campfire flickers low, each spark snapping like a musket shot from centuries before the musket was even known on these plains. You sit close to the heat, wrapped in the smell of smoke and horse sweat, the soundtrack of an empire that conquered the known world. Out here, the stars look closer than anywhere else, so close you imagine they could hear secrets if you spoke them aloud. The Mongols certainly thought so. They believed that the night sky was a listening god, one that rewarded strength and punished the faint-hearted. Under those watchful eyes, the first step of their terrible breeding dream began, the belief that only the strongest deserved to create life. They shift on the hard earth, trying to picture it, tribes scattered across endless grasslands, bound not by walls or temples but by bloodlines. Every rider was a link in a chain forged through selection speed, endurance, sharp vision, and the ability to sleep through a blizzard in the open without freezing solid. Those who couldn't, they didn't last long enough to matter. Out here, natural selection wasn't just philosophy, it was a military policy. The wind claws at your cloak, and you almost hear whispers in it, the sound of fathers testing sons. A child, barely old enough to hold a bow, is told to ride alone at night until dawn. If he returns, he is part of the bloodline. If not, the steppe reclaims him without ceremony. Harsh, yes, but the Mongols weren't sentimental. They built the greatest cavalry force on earth by trusting no weakness, not even the tender kind. Still, as historians like to point out, not all of it was pure cruelty. Some of it was calculated pragmatism. When you raise armies in a world with no hospitals, no antibiotics, and no second chances, you start thinking differently about survival. The Mongols believed that humanity, like a horse herd, could be improved through careful breeding. And the frightening thing is it worked. Their warriors could ride for days, sleep in the saddle, drink the blood of their horses when food ran out, and still fight like devils reborn from the dust. The campfire pops, sending up a spark that drifts into the dark. You watch it fade, thinking of how such a people viewed life itself, not as sacred but as a tool. Every birth was an experiment, every death data. The main virtue was endurance. Even today, archaeologists studying Mongol skeletons remark on the density of the bones, the telltale wear patterns of people who spent most of their existence on horseback. Some of those bones, found far from Mongolia, tell stories of children born on campaign, growing up in saddlebags rather than cradles. One contemporary Chinese chronicler claimed, perhaps exaggerating, perhaps not, that the Mongol infant learns to grip before he learns to cry. The quirky tidbit that always makes scholars pause? Some say Mongol mothers swaddle their infants so tightly that the baby's bones moulded to saddle posture, hips angled forward, knees slightly flexed, training them from birth for mounted life. Whether that's apocryphal or not, the imagery stays with you. An entire people reshaping the human body to match the rhythm of hooves. The night deepens. The horses beyond the camp snort and shuffle. You remember that this world's logic was as simple as it was merciless. Those who endure, rule. Those who falter, vanish. The empire that would one day stretch from the Pacific to the Danube began here, in places like this, under stars that flicker like cold fires. Genghis Khan himself, then still Temujin, was born into that survivalist crucible. You imagine his mother, Hulen, clutching him in a felt tent while outside rival clans tore at each other like wolves. His father poisoned, his family abandoned, Temujin's early life was practically a breeding test in human form. Hunger sharpened his will, betrayal tempered it. When he rose to power, he brought with him not just vengeance, but a new doctrine, that the Mongol body could be engineered into perfection, just as horses had been bred for speed and endurance. And so, as his conquest expanded, so too did a subtle and terrifying kind of science. Scribes began keeping records, not of taxes or crops, but of parentage, bloodline, and traits. A rider with exceptional eyesight might be assigned to a wife with long-distance stamina. A mother known to survive childbirth easily would be paired with men from successful military families. All of it was practical, cold, and strangely modern. You almost expect to see clipboards and DNA charts, only the ink here is blood, and the laboratory is a battlefield. The steppe wind rises again, howling like a living thing. You pull your blanket tighter, thinking about how easily ideals turn monstrous. The Mongols didn't call it cruelty, they called it harmony. They saw themselves as the chosen instruments of the eternal blue sky. In their cosmology, even selective mating had divine sanction. If the sky demanded a stronger people, who were they to argue? And so, generation after generation, they leaned into the idea that humanity could be sculpted, like clay hardened by hardship. Historians still dispute how organized it all truly was. Some claim that the notion of a deliberate breeding program is an exaggeration, a projection of later European chroniclers who wanted to rationalize the Mongols' near-superhuman effectiveness in war. Others, however, point to oral traditions and surviving records that hint at something more deliberate, more systematic. Maybe it wasn't a lab in the modern sense, but the intention was unmistakable. Build strength, build resilience. Greed the next conquest. You glance toward the horizon. In your imagination, an army appears there, black shapes cresting the hill in perfect silence, each rider moving as if guided by a single mind. They say Mongol cavalry could travel 70 miles a day without breaking formation. You picture that, and realize how such efficiency must have seemed impossible to their enemies, almost supernatural. But when you consider what shaped them, it's less mystery, more inevitability. They were raised, trained, and bred to function as extensions of a will greater than their own. Some chroniclers wrote that Genghis could look upon a field of soldiers and pick out, at a glance, which ones carried the flame of the steppes in their veins. Of course, that could just mean he had an uncanny eye for morale, but the legend suggests otherwise, that he believed certain men were born with destiny in their blood. It's a chilling echo of genetic determinism centuries before Mendel ever studied peas. Smoke drifts like a ghostly veil, and through it you sense the quiet arrogance of a people who thought they could improve on nature itself. They tested everything, not just strength, but reaction time, eyesight, cold resistance. There are records of boys being made to plunge their arms into ice water while chanting invocations, told to ignore pain because pain was weakness leaving the bloodline. The survivors were celebrated, the rest were forgotten. You can't help but think of how modern societies would recoil at such extremity. And yet, on the steppe, this philosophy built an empire. The Mongols didn't invent cruelty, but they industrialized endurance. In their world, suffering wasn't punishment, it was purification. Each scar a credential, each hardship a test of worth. Another gust rattles the tent flap, and you imagine being one of them, perhaps a young recruit, lying awake beside your horse, the animal's warmth the only thing keeping you alive in sub-zero cold. You dream not of comfort but of being chosen, to be allowed to marry, to carry forward the blood of warriors. The Empire's quiet commandment was simple: reproduce only the strong. Even affection was regulated. Love could wait, legacy could not. Some anthropologists note a strange side effect of this system. Despite its brutality, it produced a deep sense of communal pride. Every child born was not just a family affair but a national investment. The tribe would gather, assess the newborn's vigour, bless it with milk, and watch for omens in the way it grasped a finger or cried at wind. They believed the eternal sky marked its favourites early. The most haunting part is how effective myth and biology became when fused. The Mongols genuinely believed they were evolving under divine guidance, that their bones were thicker, their reflexes faster, their spirits purified by wind and dust. And perhaps that belief itself became self-fulfilling. When you convince a people that they are bred from gods, they start to behave like it. You stretch your legs toward the fire. Somewhere far away wolves howl, a sound that to the Mongols was never mere background noise. The wolf was their ancestor symbol, their mythic forefather. They even traced Jenghis's bloodline to a blue-grey wolf and a deer, creatures chosen for cunning and grace. It's a metaphor that also reads like a manifesto. Combine predator and prey, discipline and speed, to create something unstoppable. You can almost feel the eerie symmetry. The empire is a pack, the steppe is its hunting ground, humanity is its prey. A log collapses into embers. The red glow paints the ground like molten metal. You realise that what's really horrifying isn't the violence, but the purpose. Everything served the idea of optimization. They weren't sadists, they were engineers of survival. They believed that the human spirit could be tuned the way one tunes a bowstring, tight enough to sing, never slack enough to rest. It's easy now to romanticize their success, to call it destiny or genius. But beneath the glory, you can see the cost. Generations moulded by fear, obedience, and the expectation of greatness. No wonder their soldiers rode into battle singing. They'd been taught that death was merely the final test in the breeding cycle. The fire flickers low. Your eyes grow heavy. You think of the wind still rolling over those plains today, rushing over ancient burial mounds where the bones of both conquerors and experiments lie mingled. Out here, history isn't a story, it's sediment. Each layer whispers of ambitions too vast for comfort. You close your eyes for a moment, hearing again the distant drumbeat of hoofs, the endless rhythm of a civilization that decided a perfect soldier could be born, not merely trained. And you realize, as sleep begins to pull you under, that the true terror isn't in what they did, it's in how much of it makes a strange, unsettling sense. The fire from the last camp has faded into a memory now, and you find yourself moving through a dawn that feels older than time itself. The steppe stretches in every direction, an ocean of yellowed grass rippling under a sky too wide to comprehend. The air is cold, pure and sharp enough to wake something ancient inside you. Ahead you see the silhouettes of women on horseback, riding in absolute silence. They move not as individuals, but like the wind-given form, strong, disciplined, relentless. These are the women the Mongols called the Eke Selhi, the mothers of the wind. They are not just wives or mothers. They are the empire's living engine, the vessels through which the next generation of warriors will emerge. In this moment, you start to understand that Mongol supremacy was not only forged on the battlefield, it was cultivated in tents, born of decisions made by shamans and warlords about which women could bring forth the empire's future. Strength was not optional, it was sacred. And motherhood was not a private matter, it was a national strategy. The wind claws through your cloak as you follow them to a small settlement, where the tents are arranged in a perfect circle, a symbol of unity under the eternal blue sky. The morning smoke rises from the felt roofs, carrying the smell of mare's milk and ash. Children chase one another between horses, laughing, oblivious to the invisible scrutiny that governs their every movement. For every child who laughs, a mother has already been judged. You step closer, and the picture sharpens. In this society, women are not delicate ornaments hidden behind walls. They are tested, weighed, and chosen. The Mongols prized women who could ride long distances, manage livestock, defend a camp, and still give birth without assistance. Every task doubled as a test of genetic worth. A woman who could endure hunger and cold without complaint was a treasure, not because of her charm, but because she could pass endurance down like a family heirloom. One Persian chronicler wrote with a mix of awe and horror, but Mongol women command as much authority in camp as their men do in war. They manage logistics, trade, and diplomacy. They decided when to move the herds and when to strike tents before storms. In the quiet language of survival, they were the architects of empire. But behind that strength lay something colder. You soon learn that even their marriages were often engineered with the same precision as breeding horses. Genghis Khan and his descendants understood that human traits, bravery, fertility, stamina, could be guided by pairing the right partners. A woman who had borne strong sons was valuable not for sentiment, but for utility. Sometimes, when her husband died, she would be compelled to marry a brother or cousin of equal rank, ensuring the bloodline stayed consolidated. It was not love, it was logistics. You picture the shamanic gatherings held under the moonlight, where the fates of women were decided. The elders, draped in wolf fur, consulted bones and stars, claiming to read omens of strength in the flicker of firelight. The chosen women would then undergo rituals, fasting, riding, meditating on the open plain, to purify the womb. The belief was simple. A strong mother, untainted by softness or fear, would bear a stronger child. The concept sounds half mystical, half clinical, primitive eugenics wrapped in spiritual cloth. And yet you can't dismiss the results. Mongol women were astonishingly resilient. There are verified accounts of them giving birth during a campaign, cutting the cord with a knife, and remounting within hours. Some even fought alongside men, wielding bows or carrying infants on their backs. Modern historians sometimes call this gender equality by necessity, though the Mongols wouldn't have recognized the phrase. They saw it as the natural order. A woman's value was measured by her capacity to create and sustain warriors. There's a peculiar tidbit whispered in the steppe traditions, one that always seems to blur the line between myth and fact. It's said that pregnant women were encouraged to ride into strong winds to train their unborn children. The logic, if you can call it that, was that the turbulence and resistance would strengthen the baby's spirit. You imagine the sight, a woman galloping full speed into the gale, hair whipping behind her, laughing as the sky howls in her face. Somewhere in that chaos, a child was believed to absorb courage through the mother's heartbeat. When you think of it, the philosophy makes a twisted kind of sense. Why not begin training before birth? As you walk among the tents, you notice the quiet dignity of the women. Their faces are weathered by wind, their hands calloused from rope and rain. Some grind mare's milk into curds, some braid their daughter's hair. Others whisper prayers to the spirits of the ancestors. There is affection, yes, but never softness. You realize that tenderness was rationed here, like sugar in wartime. The steppe did not allow excess comfort. There's an old Mongol proverb that says, "The womb is the forge of the nation." Every generation understood it literally. You see, reproduction wasn't just a biological act, it was governance. Genghis Khan's administration tracked marriages and offspring among elite families as if they were managing a breeding registry. When a line produced exceptional warriors, the Khan ensured that line continued, often through arranged unions with families of similar reputation. The empire expanded by controlling not only territory, but heredity. Historians still argue whether this system was formalized or intuitive. Others' words and details moved up to increase the challenges of being reassembled. Either way, the outcome was the same. A society obsessed with mental history. One modern anthropologist noted an eerie parallel. Mongol customs around childbirth resembled selective animal breeding more than human family structures. The healthiest mares were reserved for the best stallions. Likewise, the most resilient women were married into successful warrior families. Over time, entire clans became synonymous with specific virtues: speed, toughness, or fearlessness. You could almost chart the empire's map by its human genetics. The irony, of course, is that this system also gave women a strange kind of authority. Since a lineage's survival depended on them, their opinions mattered. They managed supply routes, advised on diplomacy, even commanded troops in emergencies. But that authority came with no true autonomy. A woman could choose how to survive, but not whether she would be chosen. You remember one famous story about Berte, Genghis Khan's first wife. After being abducted and held captive by another tribe, she was rescued months later. She gave birth soon after her return. The child's paternity was uncertain, but Denghis accepted him as his own, claiming that fate had chosen the boy. Some historians see this as evidence of pragmatism. Denghis valued strength over purity. Others interpret it as proof that lineage, once established by divine omen, overrode biological doubt. Either way, it shows how the Mongols' concept of inheritance straddled myth and practicality. In another account, when a woman died in childbirth, her body was honoured like a fallen soldier's. The logic was that she had given her life in service to the nation. The empire's chroniclers wrote of such deaths not with sorrow, but reverence. To them, the act of giving birth was indistinguishable from dying in battle. It was the same ultimate contribution. You can almost hear the lullabies sung in the yurts, low, rhythmic, like the beating of hooves. They out-soothing songs their instructions. Grow strong, grow fast, grow fearless. A mother hums it to her baby as if whispering a prophecy. It's no wonder, then, that Mongol children were known to ride horses before they could walk. The line between nature and nurture blurred completely here. By the time the sun reaches its peak, you've seen how these women shaped not just life, but legend. Their existence is a paradox. Enslaved by purpose, yet exalted by necessity, you find it difficult to judge them by modern morality. On the steppe, choice was a luxury, and survival was more. Later that evening, as the wind softens and the tents glow from within, you watch a group of mothers gather around a newborn. The baby's tiny fists open and close like questions. A shaman sprinkles fermented mare's milk over its lips, murmuring words that translate roughly to "May you breathe storms." Then the mother lifts her eyes to the sky, silent and unafraid. The scene feels both beautiful and chilling. You realize you are witnessing the core of the Mongol miracle, the fusion of nature, faith and ambition into something greater than any one generation. These mothers of the wind were the unseen architects of conquest, their bodies the bridge between myth and empire. And perhaps that's the strangest thought of all. The Mongols conquered half the world not merely because of superior tactics, but because they engineered belief into biology. They trained their children to think endurance was love, and discipline was destiny. Once that idea took root, no army could stand against it. As night returns and the horizon burns with the last streaks of sunset, you feel a deep unease settle in your chest. You realize that in this world, tenderness could coexist with terror, and both could serve the same purpose, to ensure the empire would never fade. The wind sighs across the grass, carrying the smell of smoke and milk. You close your eyes, hearing the soft rhythm of a mother's hum mingling with the endless whisper of the steppe. For a moment it feels almost peaceful, until you remember what that peace was built upon, the quiet, methodical shaping of humanity into a weapon. The morning sun rises like a blade, slicing through a thin mist that hangs over the encampment. Dew glistens on the grass, and far in the distance, a line of riders moves with mathematical precision. You walk among them, the air sharp with cold and authority. The empire is no longer a scattered tribe. It is an organism, breathing, expanding, recording itself. Every hoofbeat seems to say we are order out of chaos. And at the centre of that order lies something both mundane and monstrous, paperwork, or what passes for it here, scrolls of sheepskin inked in charcoal and oxblood, carried from tent to tent by scribes who catalogue not taxes or land, but blood. You find one such scribe hunched over a portable desk. His quill scratches the hide with mechanical precision, listing names, ages and traits. Batar, son of Arig, known for strength and endurance. Mother, Saran, of the Orkon clan. Sturdy hips, strong milk. It reads less like genealogy and more like a breeder's record. You realise with a chill that you are staring at the human equivalent of a stud book. The empire has become self-aware about its own biology. Genghis Khan, who once slept on the ground with no tent to his name, now commands clerks to measure humanity. The logic is simple. If horses can be bred for stamina, so can people. The empire's administrators, many of them educated Persians and Chinese scholars co-opted into Mongol service, were repurposed to manage this vast inventory. It's as if the gods themselves had outsourced evolution to a team of overworked bureaucrats. In one corner of the camp, you see the wooden chest where these records are stored. Each scroll is sealed with a wax stamp bearing a clan mark. The scribes whisper that these documents are guarded more carefully than treasure, for within them lies the true map of the empire, not its borders, but its bloodlines. To lose such records would be to lose the thread of destiny. And here's where the horror deepens. These lists aren't just for the elite. They extend into the conquered territories too. When a city falls, its survivors are not only counted, they are evaluated. Strong men are taken as warriors or labourers, clever ones as scholars or clerks, and beautiful women as wives or concubines for the generals. A crude form of selection emerges. Absorb the useful, eliminate the weak. The Mongols call it pragmatism. Future generations might call it systemic human curation. You follow a caravan transporting these scribes to another encampment, watching how methodical it all is. A man named Narration, head of the records office, explains proudly that the Khan's court has created what they call the Yehe Sudur, the Great Registry. It lists not only ancestry, but the notable qualities of families, horsemanship, fertility, eyesight, resistance to cold, even singing voice. It sounds absurdly detailed until you realize that this registry doubles as a talent database. Need a courier capable of riding in blizzards? Check the Suda. Need a family with no history of rebellion? Cross-reference their loyalty record. A curious parallel occurs to you centuries before genetic science. This empire has built an algorithm of flesh. No equations, no computers, just observation, repetition, and ruthless application. A small smile creeps across the scribe's face as he notices your discomfort. You look surprised, he says softly, dipping his quill again. But tell me, how else should we know who is fit to build eternity? His words hang in the air, unsettling in their sincerity. You realize that for him this isn't cruelty, it's administration. That perhaps is what makes it terrifying. There's no sadism here, only efficiency. The record keepers divide people into categories with chilling neutrality. Proven stock, uncertain stock, wasted stock. You almost laugh because it sounds like livestock terminology. Then you remember that to the Mongols, humans and horses share the same destiny. They're both born to serve the herd. Historians still debate whether this system truly existed at such scale. Some claim it's a later exaggeration, a bureaucratic myth. Others argue that fragments of these registries survive in Persian archives, suggesting that Genghis's administrators did, in fact, manage bloodlines across conquered regions. Perhaps it was not science as we know it, but its shadow, an intuition that heredity mattered long before DNA had a name. You stand at the threshold of the administrative tent, watching a scribe record a newborn's entry. The baby is barely a day old, wrapped in felt. The mother sits beside him, stoic, exhausted. The scribe asks her questions in a flat tone. Did your first son walk early? Do your father's eyes see far in the dark? Has anyone in your family ever gone mad? She answers without emotion. The ink dries. The infant is already part of the state. You can't decide what's worse, the questions themselves, or how routine they sound. Somewhere a child's cry joins the sound of stamping seals. Bureaucracy and biology merge. One historian once remarked that the Mongol Empire was the first government to treat population as a resource. You think about that as you look across the cow. The men train, the women weave, the scribes write, all feeding a system that measures worth and survival value. To the Mongols, compassion is an efficiency. A quirky detail emerges as you examine one scroll. In addition to human traits, it also records the preferred horse breed of each family. To know the man, know his mount, it says. Apparently, the temperament of the rider and horse were believed to reflect each other. If a family's horses were known for speed and courage, so were its sons. It's as if they believed genetics could cross species through proximity and habit. A strange superstition, but one that shaped policy. You imagine the implications. Suppose a warrior's line produced weak horses one season. Could his family's marriage prospects suffer? Probably. In this empire, biology and superstition are partners, not opposites. Even the shamanic rituals adapt to the logic of record, not due. But, writes to the cult, men deserve the power of war to be satisfied by others. You observe one, a circle of elders chanting as a newborn's lineage is declared before the gods. Instead of invoking destiny, they recite data, names, ancestors' achievements. It sounds like a census masquerading as prayer. When the chant ends, the shaman burns the edges of a parchment and buries it under a stone. He says it seals the family strength for 7 generations. You realize that spirituality here serves bureaucracy. Faith itself has been annexed by the empire's ledger. As the day wears on, you visit another tent. this one belonging to a Mongol noble overseeing regional breeding directives. His name is Togon. He's tall, sharp-eyed, with the calm of someone who believes in his own permanence. On the table before him lies a massive chart, lines branching like veins. We track who marries whom, he explains, tracing with his finger. Too much closeness weakens the calf. Too much distance weakens loyalty. The balance is everything. It's an early articulation of what we'd later call controlled genetic diversity. And it's not just talk. Records show that intermarriage across clans was often encouraged if it promised stronger offspring, but limited if it threatened political cohesion. The Empire applied the same logic to alliances as to biology, hybrid vida, but only when it served the state. You ask how he ensures obedience to such policies. Togon chuckles. The same way we train horses, he says. Reward and culling. He means it literally. Families that produced strong soldiers received more livestock, better pastures, and exemption from certain taxes. Those who produced cowards or rebels were stripped of their herds and relocated. It's a system that rewards fertility with privilege and punishes deviation with exile. You think of it as a grotesque mirror of meritocracy, a world where worth is measured in muscle fibres. At dusk, the registry office closes. The scribes roll their scrolls, clean their quills, and extinguish the lamps. Outside, the sky burns red over the steppe. You hear laughter from a nearby camp, men singing around a fire. For a moment, you almost forget the grim arithmetic inside those tents. The music is raw, free, human, but you can't shake the thought that even this joy has been recorded somewhere, filed under cultural spirit high. You lie back on the cold grass staring at the stars. Above you, the same constellations that guided caravans and armies twinkle indifferently. The Mongols read those stars as messages, celestial entries in another kind of registry. They believed the eternal blue sky kept its own records, and that the Khan was merely its earthly scribe. Historians still wrestle with that paradox. An illiterate warrior king who nevertheless built one of the most administratively sophisticated empires in history. Denghis didn't need to read to understand systems. He saw that power depended not on gold or castles, but on patterns of loyalty, talent, and flesh. He simply turned those patterns into policy. As the night deepens, the tents begin to quiet. You can hear the faint rustle of parchment from the records tent, like a whispering heart still beating. You think of how much trust these people place in the written word, a society of riders ruled by archivists. And you wonder whether they ever realized that in trying to perfect their species, they had already become enslaved by their own idea of perfection. You close your eyes but can't sleep. Your thoughts wander to modern echoes, databases, genetic testing, fitness metrics. Humanity, it seems, never truly stops keeping score. The Mongols only did it more honestly with ink and instinct instead of algorithms and apps. Somewhere beyond the horizon, thunder rumbles. Or maybe it's hooves again, the eternal reminder that the steppe forgets nothing. Every name ever written in those scrolls may have turned to dust, but the idea persists, that strength can be measured, catalogued, and passed on. As dawn begins to edge the sky with light, you rise. The registry tent still stands silent, a vault of vanished ambitions. You glance back one last time, and imagine the scribes resuming their work, recording new births, new unions, new calculations of worth. The ink will dry, the scrolls will fade, but the logic endures. You walk away slowly, the wind pressing against your back like an invisible hand, and think to yourself that empires may crumble, but ledgers last forever. The night has passed, and dawn now rolls over the horizon like a whispering tide of gold. You stir beneath a blanket of felt, the ground beneath you still trembling faintly with the distant rhythm of hooves. Somewhere, a woman's voice hums an old steppe song, a melody so low it seems to blend with the pulse of the earth. When you open your eyes, you see her silhouette in the half-light, a pregnant rider mounting her horse. Her breath fogs in the morning air, and her posture is perfect, upright, unflinching, at ease with the cold. She tightens her reins and spurs forward into the wind. You blink. It seems impossible, yet here on the Mongol steppe this is normal. The belief runs deep, older even than Genghis Khan himself, that training a warrior begins not after birth, but long before. The womb, to the Mongols, is not a sanctuary, it's a forge. You follow her as she rides out onto the open plain. Her pace quickens. The horse's hooves slice through frost-tipped grass. The woman's expression doesn't falter even as gusts whip against her face. She rides for miles, guided by nothing but instinct and endurance. Behind her, the rest of the women ride too, expectant mothers in motion, a moving chorus of life being hardened by the elements. You realize this is no ritual dance, it's policy. Mongol shamans called it warming the spirit, though the phrase feels misleading. There is nothing gentle about it. The idea is that unborn children absorb the world through their mother's sensations. If the mother faces wind and thunder without fear, the child's heart will learn the rhythm of courage before it ever beats on its own. If she rests too much, if she grows soft or timid, the child's spirit weakens. You can almost hear the reasoning echo through generations. A baby born from stillness grows lazy. A baby born from movement grows mighty. Historians today still debate how much of this was myth and how much was enforced. Some argue it was symbolic, a kind of poetic metaphor. But others point to oral histories and records from Chinese observers describing how Mongol women continued riding deep into pregnancy, even assisting in herding and hunting. They do not fear birth, one chronicler wrote, as their children were born as if of stone and wind. It's an unsettling phrase, half admiration, half alarm. As you ride closer, you see the women pausing by a rocky outcrop. They dismount and begin a ritual. Each one holds a small pouch made of lambskin, tied with sinew. Inside is a mixture of mare's milk, wolf hair, and powdered iron scraped from weapons. They believe this blend, when pressed against the belly, blesses the child with the endurance of the horse, the cunning of the wolf, and the strength of steel. You watch one mother tie the pouch to her stomach, murmuring something that sounds like a lullaby but isn't. It's a command, softly spoken to her unborn child. Do not fear cold, do not fear cold, do not need rest. The Mongols saw no boundary between spirit and body. To them, everything physical had moral weight. If your lungs were weak, it meant your soul was fragile. If your heartbeat stayed steady in danger, the gods had favoured your bloodline. And so, by hardening the mother, they believed they were shaping destiny itself. A strange tidbit circulates among Mongol midwives of the era. It's said they could predict the future temperament of a child by the way the mother's belly moved during storms. If the fetus kicked furiously, it was a sign of warrior spirit. If it stayed still, the midwife would urge the mother to expose herself to harsher conditions, to wake the child's strength. You imagine the sight, women standing in the rain, whispering prayers to the thunder. To them, lightning wasn't danger, it was divine conversation. One shaman you meet in this vision, her face lined with age, her eyes like small black mirrors, explains it with eerie calm. The womb is the first battlefield. The child must learn that peace is not real. Her tone is not cruel, merely factual. You feel a chill, realizing she believes every word. Modern scholars still wrestle with such practices. Were they deliberate training regimens, or just survival necessity romanticized later? After all, life on the steppe was so demanding that women had no choice but to work and ride even while pregnant. Maybe the ideology simply grew from observation. Strong mothers produce strong children. Then again, maybe ideology shaped reality. The Mongols were never content to let nature act alone. They had to improve it. You sit beside a campfire later that evening as an elder recounts an old story. It's about Genghis Khan's mother, Olun, during her pregnancy. When bandits attacked their camp, she is said to have ridden for 3 days straight through snow and hunger, clutching her unborn son within her. The legend claims that during the flight, she spoke to him through her heartbeat, promising that he would never know fear. When he was born, the midwife found his tiny hands clenched, nails already digging into his palms. The story ends with the claim that he did not cry. Whether fact or myth, it encapsulates the Mongol worldview. Endurance is inherited, and weakness is optional. You can't help but shiver as you imagine this, the merging of myth and biology. Somewhere between superstition and proto-science lies a belief system that sees suffering as prenatal education. It's not nurturing as you know it, it's conditioning. As dusk falls, you wander through the camp again. You notice the way expectant mothers move, each gesture purposeful. They squat low when they milk mares, lift hides, balance water skins. The tasks are grueling, but there's no pity here, only respect. Children who survive this kind of gestation are seen as proof of divine favour. You overhear one man say to another, "She rides with storm, her son will ride with empire." Even childbirth itself is ritualized. When the time comes, the mother does not lie down. She kneels or squats, gripping a rope tied to a beam above her. The wind must enter the tent, I say, so that the baby's first breath carries a piece of the sky. The midwife's first words to the infant are not welcome, but stand. There's a strange beauty in it, even if it terrifies you. Everything here is designed to teach life that it owes the world strength. Compassion is for later, if it comes at all. A quirky historical note surfaces from a 13th century Persian source. Mongol women supposedly avoided eating the hearts of certain animals while pregnant, fearing it might make their sons too soft. Instead, they preferred lean meat, fermented milk, and broth made from horse bones, foods associated with energy and mobility. They treated the mother's diet as strategic input, a form of prenatal warfare. It's as if the entire tribe participated in sculpting the child before it even existed. You think about how this philosophy contrasts with the sedentary civilizations they conquered. In China or Persia, nobility prized delicate beauty, softness, and refinement. The Mongols despised those traits. They found virtue in coarseness, nobility, and endurance. A woman who could ride through pain was a living sermon. A man born of her blood was destiny made flesh. There's one particularly striking account recorded by a captured cleric who travelled with the Mongol court. He claimed to have seen a heavily pregnant woman in her final month racing horses for sport. When he asked why, her husband laughed and said, "If the child cannot ride, let it die now." You hope it's exaggeration, but deep down you suspect it isn't. The scholar who translated that passage centuries later called it barbaric. But perhaps from the Mongol view, it was honest. Nature itself was barbaric. The empire merely followed its example. Later that night, you sit beside another fire. The stars above look close enough to touch, the Milky Way stretching like a silver road over the black expanse. Across the camp, you see one expectant mother tracing a line across her belly with ash, whispering a blessing to the spirits. She notices you watching and smiles faintly. "He already knows the wind," she says, placing a hand on her stomach. He turns when it blows. Her voice carries no arrogance, only certainty. You realize she means it literally. In the flickering light, you remember the words of a historian who once wrote, "The Mongols did not raise children, they released them." The phrase fits perfectly. Here, parenthood isn't protection, it's preparation. The horses lie down, their breath steaming in the cold. You lie awake, listening to the wind press against the tents like a giant lung. You think of all the unborn children being shaped by this same wind, their first lullaby, the howl of the steppe. What kind of world must it have been, where even life before birth was a test? As you drift between wakefulness and sleep, the firelight turns everything into silhouettes. You see riders made of smoke galloping through the sky, their outlines merging with constellations. You imagine the unborn drifting with them, half spirits, half soldiers, learning, somehow, to be unbreakable before they even open their eyes. And as the last flame flickers out, you realize the most unsettling truth of all, that in their ruthless logic, the Mongols achieved something terrifyingly consistent. They built a people who believed that comfort was corruption, that even the womb should teach endurance, and that softness at any stage of life was an insult to the sky. You breathe out slowly, the air frosting before you. The world feels very still. Somewhere in the distance, a mare neighs softly, and for a fleeting moment you imagine she's answering a child not yet born. The morning is pale and silver when you wake, and the air carries that faint metallic tang of dried milk and iron. Around you, the steppe hums softly, the rhythmic chewing of horses, the soft bleating of goats, the creak of leather harnesses. But the most distinct smell of all is sour-sweet, almost pungent fermented mare's milk. Kumis. To the Mongols, it isn't just a drink, it's life itself, and in the strangest sense, it's medicine, religion, and nourishment for empire all at once. You watch a young woman pour it from a leather flask into a shallow bowl. The liquid is cloudy white, bubbling faintly, alive with fermentation. "Drink," she says, handing it to a boy no older than 5. He drinks without hesitation, the milk dripping down his chin. Then she dips her finger into a small horn cup filled with something darker, horseblood, still warm, and traces a line across the child's forehead. The gesture is deliberate, solemn. "So that he remembers what keeps him alive," she murmurs. It's both intimate and unsettling. You realize that what modern minds would call ritual cannibalism or cruelty was to them spiritual logic. The horse gave everything: speed, warmth, shelter, food, and even blood. To share it was not barbaric, but sacred. A Mongol saying goes, "The horse is half the man." You begin to suspect it was more than a metaphor. As the sun rises, the entire camp gathers around a central vat, where mares are being milked. The sound is hypnotic. The rhythmic pour, the frothing of liquid, the laughter of children helping their mothers churn it in leather sacks. Kumis production is communal, almost musical, and every drop has purpose. Newborns are rubbed with it. Warriors drink it before battle. Mothers use it to clean wounds, to soothe burns, to ward off spirits. You taste it yourself, curious. It's sharp, yeasty, with a faint alcoholic sting that burns pleasantly down your throat. Within seconds, your stomach warms, your mind brightens. The Mongols claimed it opens the heart. Modern science, ironically, agrees. It's full of probiotics and energy. But here, among the tents, it's more than food. It's inheritance. The empire's mothers, you learn, practiced strict dietary codes during pregnancy and nursing. Mare's milk was considered the purest of all substances, because mares, unlike cows, ran freely and shared the same wind as their riders. Cow's milk was too heavy, it bred sluggishness. Goat milk was too earthy, it clouded the spirit. What was it? I did that for my problem. Only mare's milk contained air, that invisible quality of motion that connected humans to the eternal sky. And so from infancy, Mongol children would fed the sky itself, one fermented gulp at a time. There's a strange tidbit from the secret history of the Mongols. It claims that Genghis himself, as a baby, was fed on a blend of mare's milk and blood during famine. His mother supposedly pricked her horse's neck with a silver needle and mixed the drops with milk, believing that combining the two would teach him mercy and ferocity together. Whether true or myth, it captures the essence of their philosophy, nourishment and violence, entwined like sinew in flesh. You watch as another mother repeats the same act. She pierces a vein in her horse's neck, collects a few drops, then seals the wound with a handful of earth. The horse doesn't flinch. She whispers a prayer, "Forgive, but remember." Then she stirs the blood into her child's cup of kumis and hands it over. The boy drinks proudly, wiping his mouth with his sleeve. You realize you're watching the empire's biology in motion, a living tradition where food is training and consumption is communion. To the Mongols, blood and milk were twins. Both carried vitality, both came from living creatures, both connected body to spirit. Mixing them was a way of reminding oneself that life demands both gentleness and aggression. A mother's milk gave calm, a horse's blood gave courage. To raise a child without both was to risk imbalance. Historians still argue over how widespread this practice truly was. Some think it was symbolic, an occasional gesture of respect to the animal spirit. Others believe it was common enough to be cultural norm, especially among warrior families. Whichever version is true, the meaning endures. Nourishment wasn't passive, it was apprenticeship. You sit beside the mares and watch them graze. A foal nudges its mother's flank, finding milk. The motion is identical to the way Mongol women nurse their babies. Swift, practical, unceremonious. Nothing in this world is sentimental. Even love here has purpose. Later, you see a group of children being given their first solo meal of kumis mixed with ground meat. It's called the Feast of Teeth, a celebration of the moment they can chew. Each child must finish their bowl without flinching at the taste. The true son of the steppe never spits out bitterness, one elder says. The children laugh nervously, then gulp down their portions while the adults cheer. It's equal parts cute and terrifying, a small feast of initiation into endurance. There's a scene recorded by a Persian chronicler who travelled with Batu Khan's army. During a siege, supplies ran low. The soldiers slit their horses' veins, drank the blood, and rode on. He wrote that they seemed possessed by demons who feared neither pain nor exhaustion. To the Mongols, though, That act was neither madness nor magic. It was habit, one drilled into them since infancy, when milk and blood mingled on their tongues. It's not just physical sustenance, it's a form of identity. The taste of kumis, sour and electric, becomes a mnemonic trigger, a reminder of homeland, of motion, of divine sanction. Even centuries later, Mongols in exile would weep when tasting it again. You begin to see that the empire didn't only conquer with swords, it conquered through culture coded into biology. A curious scholar once wrote that the Mongol diet was an evolutionary algorithm written in milk. Harsh environments reward adaptation, and the Mongols turned necessity into ritual. Every nutrient had a purpose. Every restriction was philosophy disguised as recipe. By mid-afternoon, the camp bursts into activity. Huge vats of kumis are hung from wooden frames, being churned rhythmically by women wielding paddles. Children run circles around them, chanting verses. White as sky's breath, sharp as horses' cry, drink and never rest, for death must pass you by. You can't tell if it's song or prayer, but the rhythm matches the beating of hooves in the distance. The entire community vibrates with motion. Nearby, a young shaman sits cross-legged, dipping his fingers into a bowl of milk mixed with herbs. He flicks droplets into the fire, watching them hiss. To feed the spirits, he says, so they feed us in return. You notice that even ritual offerings revolve around consumption, the cycle of giving and taking, of feeding and being fed. Later, you're invited to share an evening meal. It's simple, but symbolic. Dried meat, flatbread and kumis, served in a horn cup. Before anyone eats, an elder raises his bowl and declares, "To the mothers who bleed and the horses who breathe." Everyone repeats the line, solemn and proud. You realize it's the Empire's closest thing to a prayer, a creed of reciprocity between human and animal, flesh and spirit. It's easy to dismiss this as barbaric, but as you sit there you begin to feel the strange logic of it. The Mongols were not trying to glorify cruelty, they were trying to erase the line between nourishment and sacrifice. To them, the world was a single organism, its parts feeding each other endlessly. A horse's blood became a warrior's muscle, a mother's milk became an empire's will. Historians still debate the biological consequences of such a diet. Some point out that the Mongols' near-exclusive reliance on animal products made them resistant to famine and adaptable across climates. Others note that their microbiomes, hardened by fermented dairy, allowed them to survive infections that decimated sedentary populations. Whether coincidence or consequence, their physiology seemed perfectly tuned for mobility and endurance. As the sun sets, you see another mother feeding her baby. This time, she dips her finger into the child's mouth and murmurs, "You will never starve." It sounds less like comfort, more like a vow. The baby coos softly, unaware of the prophecy etched into his feeding. And as night falls, the camp drinks again, men, women, children, elders, all sharing kunis by the fire. You sip it too, feeling the warmth spread through your limbs. The drink tastes of the earth and the sky, of hunger and triumph. It's sour, yes, but strangely addictive. The Empire, you think, must have felt the same way about power. In the flicker of the flames, you imagine those long cavalry columns again, galloping endlessly across the plains, sustained by nothing more than the blood of their mounts and the milk of their land. No supply lines, no wheat, no granaries, only endurance liquefied into ritual. And then it dawns on you, the secret of the Mongols wasn't just strategy or cruelty, it was self-sufficiency turned spiritual. They didn't just consume the world, they became inseparable from it. You finish your drink, set the bowl down, and listen to the night wind ripple across the grass. It sounds like breathing, one vast, endless exhale shared between rider, horse, and land. You close your eyes, and for a moment you feel the strange calm of belonging to a people who believed survival was sacred. By the time the sky burns gold again, the camp has changed. The newborns from yesterday's rituals are bundled against their mothers' backs, and the older children, the ones you can already walk and shout, are lined up outside the yurts. They're laughing, fighting, imitating grown warriors, but the laughter fades when the elders approach. Today is not for play. Today begins the 1,000-step trials. You stand at a distance, half in awe, half in disbelief. The trials are the steps version of a school, a training ground, and a purge all at once. Every child above 5 is expected to join. The idea is simple in theory and horrifying in practice. The weak must be strengthened, and the strong must be revealed. To the Mongols, life itself as a trial is to start early. The morning air is knife-sharp, the wind low and steady. The first task is endurance. The children are told to run, not in circles, not toward a finish line, just run. They sprint across the plains until they vanish into the distance, tiny dots against the endless grass. Mothers stand at the edge of camp, watching silently. No one cheers, no one calls them back. The silence is heavier than any noise could be. When the first child stumbles and falls, no one rushes forward. A shaman murmurs, the ground teaches, the child must rise alone. If he doesn't, he is left behind till the herd circles back. The rule is not cruelty, it's principle. Help is a luxury the steppe doesn't give. By midday the group returns, dust-covered, panting, triumphant. Some limp, others grin with wild pride. One boy no older than 7 carries a rabbit he managed to snare along the way. The elders nod approvingly. Strength, endurance, cunning, all measurable in sweat and dirt. Next comes the test of cold. The children strip to their tunics and stand in the shallow river nearby. The water is melt cold, flowing straight from distant mountain snow. The shock hits their bodies like a slap from the sky. Some cry out, most grit their teeth. The eldest instructor, a man with arms like braided rope, walks along the line, dipping his hand in the water and pressing it against each child's chest. If he feels a steady heartbeat, the child passes. If not, they must stay longer. A warrior's blood must learn to ignore the cold, he says. It's brutal, yet efficient. The trials turn children into weatherproof organisms. By the time they're 12, they can sleep on ice, ride through storms, and fight through exhaustion. You think of the empires that fell to these riders, cities full of men who'd never gone barefoot in frost. No wonder the Mongols seemed like spirits of winter itself. Then comes the test of obedience. The children are lined up again, facing the sun. An elder raises his hand. When the hawk moves, you move. When it rests, you rest. He gestures upward, and from a distance, a trainer releases a hunting hawk. It circles once, twice, then dives. The children must mimic its motion, kneeling, standing, sprinting, halting, all in sync with the bird. The point isn't grace, it's awareness. The Mongols valued reflex over rhythm. To survive in battle, one must feel motion, not think it. Historians still argue whether these descriptions, recorded by travellers like Giovanni di Piando Carpine and William of Rubric, were literal or exaggerated. Some say the monks embellished, crafting monstrous tales to all European courts. Yet excavations across Mongolia reveal skeletons of adolescents with signs of extreme muscle stress and healed fractures, proof that childhood training was as relentless as legend claims. A quirky detail from an old account says that during winter training, children were made to chase their shadows across frozen ground to teach the body to follow the soul. It sounds poetic, but watching these trials, you realize how terrifyingly practical it is. By turning training into ritual, the Mongols erased complaint. Pain wasn't punishment, it was identity. The trials continue into afternoon. A group of girls is brought forward. They are to demonstrate their skill with bow and rope. The targets are small leather bags hung between galloping ponies. The girls mount and take off, firing in perfect arcs. Arrows whistle, hitting almost every mark. One girl misses, bites her lip and tries again. The elders nod, not because she succeeded, but because she refused to stop. That refusal, more than accuracy, is what they're looking for. You learn that the Mongols didn't believe in coddling either gender. Every child, male or female, had to master the bow, the lasso, and the knife. A daughter might one day manage a caravan or defend a camp. Strength wasn't gendered. It was communal. One chronicler noted that Mongol children grew up among arrows as others among toys. The next trial is darker, the test of hunger. Each child is given a small piece of dried meat and told to make it last until sunset. No more, no less. You watch them fidget, sniff the meat, nibble cautiously. Some chew too quickly and run out. Instructors smile grimly and send them out to find their own food. They must catch a mouse, a bird, or even gather roots. The lesson is harsh but direct. Hunger is not an emergency, it's an opportunity. You wonder what happens to those who fail entirely. One boy, smaller than the rest, stares at his empty hands. The elder approaches and says nothing. Instead, he tosses the boy a knife and points toward the horizon. The boy walks off into the grass alone. You feel a twist of dread, but an hour later he returns with a snake. He's shaking, bleeding slightly from the bite, but alive. The camp erupts in cheers. The elder lifts him onto his shoulders. He learned, he says. You understand then why no army could break them. Their resilience wasn't taught through lectures or threats. It was earned, one bruise and blister at a time. The trials end with ceremony at twilight. A fire is lit and the children sit in a circle. The elder shaman steps forward, holding a horn cup filled with kumis. He dips a finger into the drink and draws a line of white on each child's brow. You have walked 1,000 steps, he says. The step remembers. The phrase echoes softly through the dusk. He then throws a handful of ashes into the air. They swirl upward, catching the last light like sparks. Those who fell, he murmurs, feed the wind. No one cries. Even the mothers bow their heads silently. Grief here is private, but pride is shared. Historians still debate how such rituals began. Some suggest they were adapted from older Turkic or Siberian coming-of-age rites. Others think Genghis himself institutionalized them after uniting the tribes, turning folk custom into imperial discipline. Whatever their origin, the trials forged an identity stronger than any creed. Each child who survived carried an unspoken truth. If you can endure the step, you can endure the world. As the night deepens, you linger by the fire. The children sleep in rows, their faces smudged with soot, their breath steady. Some clutch small trinkets, bits of bone, feathers, stones. These are their trophies, each one marking a small victory over pain. You recall an old Mongol proverb, only the sky is above the one who suffers willingly. You look up. The stars shimmer like frost scattered across black velvet. You imagine how many generations have looked at this same sky, believing it watched and judged. A scholar once wrote that the Mongols practiced a biological theology. The phrase fits. Their god was endurance. Their prayer was survival. Their sacraments were blood, milk, wind, and pain. Everything physical had moral consequence. To survive was proof of virtue. To collapse was to admit spiritual failure. There's an almost eerie modern resonance in it. Replace horses with machines, step with city, and the logic persists. Even today, people worship productivity the way these children worship strength. Different tools, same gospel. But as the embers fade, you see the cost written plainly on the children's bodies. Calloused hands, bruised knees, faces already lined with discipline. They sleep soundly, but you can't help wondering what dreams fill their heads, if they dream at all. Maybe of running faster, shooting straighter, surviving longer. Near midnight, the wind picks up again. It rushes through the camp, rattling the leather flaps of the tents. For a moment, it sounds like laughter, the ghosts of past generations watching these new recruits with approval. You pull your cloak tighter and think of how few civilizations ever demanded so much, so early from their young. And yet somehow it worked. Those children grew into riders who could cover 70 miles a day, sleep in snow, and conquer kingdoms raised on sulk and fear. You realize reluctantly that this ruthless philosophy created not monsters but marvels, humans honed to such precision that even centuries later their reputation still chills the world's memory. As dawn approaches, the first light spills across the camp again. The trials are over, but their echo lingers. You see mothers gathering their children, wrapping them in furs, whispering blessings that sound more like commands. Be fast, be hard, be the wind. The phrases repeat like prayers. And as the sun climbs higher, the children mount their small horses, galloping out into the fields to play at war once more. You realize they aren't playing, they're rehearsing. The empire begins again every morning, with each new breath that refuses to break. You watch them disappear into the horizon, until all that's left is dust and silence. The steppe exhales satisfied. You wait to thunder again, but this time it's not war drums or storm clouds. It's hooves, 1,000 of them pounding in rhythm, shaking the very marrow of the earth. You pull yourself upright, blinking against the rising sun, and what you see stretches all the way to the horizon, an endless tide of horses galloping as one. Dust swirls in golden spirals above them, and running alongside, almost indistinguishable from the animals, are children. Barefoot, lean, wild-eyed, boys and girls moving with the herd as if born among them. It takes a moment for your mind to grasp what you're seeing. This is the next phase of the Mongol upbringing, one that every child who survived the 1,000-step trials must pass, learning to become half human, half horse. Here, the boundary between species isn't a line. It's a blur. The Mongols believed horses were not tools but extensions of the self, living partners that magnified a person's power. To breed and training warriors meant also breeding and training the mounts that carried them. And so, children were paired with fools almost from birth. They grew up together, shared food, shared breath, and, according to the shamans, eventually shared souls. You walk among them now, watching as an elder shouts commands. The herd splits with eerie coordination, one half veering left, the other right, leaving a narrow lane in between. Into this lane ride the youngest trainees, each clinging to a small horse's back without saddle or bridle. The elder's voice cuts through the air. Do not control the horse. Listen to it. You realize this is the essence of Mongol horsemanship. Control is weakness. Harmony is strength. The rider must learn to think with the animal, not on top of it. One boy loses balance, slips sideways, and hangs from the horse's flank by his arms. You tense, expecting disaster, but the elder only grins. Good, he shouts. Learn the body of your brother. The boy scrambles back onto the horse's back and continues riding, red-faced but unbroken. The others cheer. It's brutal, yet there's a strange grace in it. Every mistake is absorbed, not punished. Every fall is just another gallop toward mastery. As you walk further, you see another group practicing what looks like a dance. The horses circle tightly, while the riders lean low, almost brushing the ground with their fingertips. They grab small cloth bundles from the earth, practice for retrieving arrows or wounded comrades during battle. The fluidity is mesmerizing. The horses respond to the slightest leg pressure, to breaths, even to the shifting of a rider's weight. It dawns on you that this is what those endless genealogies and breeding rituals were for. The horse is the mirror of the rider. Mongols selected mounts the same way they selected spouses, for strength, endurance, and temperament. Each pairing of human and horse was as deliberate as a marriage. Some warriors even claimed they could sense their horses' dreams, as if the two shared one nervous system. A quirky detail from early travellers, Mongols would sometimes sleep beside their horses, head against the animal's chest, listening to its heartbeat. They said it trained the human heart to match the rhythm of the herd. Watching the children now, you begin to believe it. They move not like separate beings, but like synchronized muscles of one larger body. The shaman overseeing this training carries a whip made of braided mane hair. He never uses it on the animals, only on the ground, to mark rhythm. Every heartbeat is a command, he says softly. If you learn to match it, the world will obey you. As the morning wears on, you see how thoroughly the herd dominates Mongol life. Every sound, every ritual, every heartbeat echoes hooves. Even the language is filled with horse metaphors. Courage is long breath, wisdom is steady step, loyalty is unbroken rein. But there's something deeper beneath this. You realize that the Mongols' concept of strength isn't individual at all. It's symbiotic. To be powerful is to merge with another will, to lose the ego entirely in the rhythm of motion. The horse is not conquered, it's internalized. Historians still argue whether this philosophy was conscious or instinctive. Some call it spiritual ecology, the idea that man and animal share destiny. Others see it as proto-psychology, a method of conditioning children for empathy and focus to animal bonding. Whatever it was, it worked. The Mongols became the greatest cavalry force in history, not by technology, but by symbiosis. A Persian chronicler once wrote with awe that the Mongols fight as though their horses possess human minds. You glance at the scene before you and think perhaps it was the other way around. Perhaps the humans learned to possess horse minds. By noon, training shifts. The children dismount and run beside the herd, mimicking its movements. They practice breathing in rhythm with galloping hooves, exhaling when the horses strike the ground, inhaling when they lift. "You are lungs of the wind," their instructor shouts. "Do not break the air, ride it." Later, you watch the feeding ritual. The horses drink from troughs of melted snow, and the children drink after them, from the same ladles. No separation, no hierarchy. "We are one herd," says the elder proudly. You can't help thinking it's both poetic and chilling, a literal and ideological merging of species. There's a lesser-known tidbit from Mongol folklore. They believed that every warrior's soul returned to the earth through his horse. When a rider died, the horse was sometimes freed to wander, carrying his spirit until it too perished. To the Mongols, death wasn't an ending, but a reunion with the herd that stretched beyond life itself. Watching these children, you can see how such beliefs take root, where horse and human blur so completely that the line between them dissolves. In the afternoon heat, you see the riders take to a long plain where a river cuts through the grasslands. The challenge now is water. They charge straight into the current, horses splashing wildly, riders gripping with knees and instinct. The river roars, but the herd doesn't falter. You realize that to a Mongol, fear of drowning is absurd. After all, they already swim in motion every waking hour. One child loses his footing as his horse leaps the riverbank. He vanishes beneath the current, and for a tense moment, everything stops. Then, with a violent kick, he surfaces, laughing. The elder nods and cheers. He knows the breadth of the world now. It's not methodor, it's curriculum. Each danger conquered is not survival training, it's spiritual tuning. Historians still debate the psychological impact of such upbringing. Some argue it produced unparalleled discipline, but at the cost of individuality. Others claim it created empathy, an ability to sense and synchronize with other beings. To live this way is to erase the boundaries between self and other. As dusk falls, the training gives way to ceremony. The horses are gathered into a circle, their riders standing among them, hands on their necks. The shaman walks around sprinkling milk on their foreheads, chanting, "May you share one breath. May your hooves and hearts strike together." Then he raises his staff, carved with small horse heads, and strikes it 3 times on the ground. The herd whinnies in unison, as if answering. The sound rises into the sky, something primal, almost symphonic. You feel it in your ribs. It's the sound of an empire rehearsing its heartbeat. Afterward, the camp settles. Horses lie down beside their riders. The children curl against the animals' flanks, warmed by the same breath. You remember the earlier phrase, "The horse is half the man," and think now that maybe the inverse was true too. The man is half the horse. A scholar once called this bond the true secret weapon of the Mongols. It wasn't their bows, their tactics, or their numbers. It was this fusion of physiology and psychology. The empire's might began not in strategy, but in shared rhythm. As the moon rises, you lie among them, feeling the ground tremble faintly with each exhale of the herd. Around you, the camp glows faintly from dying fires. Somewhere, a child murmurs in his sleep, kicking his legs as though still galloping. You smile softly. Even in dreams, motion never stops. The shaman sits beside you, staring at the horizon. "Do you hear them?" he whispers. "The dead horses." You listen, and the wind seems to carry faint echoes, distant hooves, fading yet eternal. They run beneath us, he says. Always beneath. We ride their backs forever. You realize that this belief that the world itself is a living horse and humanity merely its rider is not superstition but philosophy. The steppe taught them this truth long before any scripture, that to survive, one must move in harmony with what carries you. You close your eyes listening. The rhythm is hypnotic, almost lullaby-like. Your pulse slows to match it. For a moment, you understand how the Mongols could ride across continents without rest, conquer without mercy, and still feel that they were merely following the natural order. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of grass and sweat and smoke. You think of all those nameless riders through history, each one a shadow of the herd, part man, part myth, part memory of hooves that never stopped. And as you drift towards sleep, you realize something strange. The steppe doesn't distinguish between the living and the dead, between horse and human. Everything that moves is part of its endless breath. The herd continues, and so does the empire. The next morning, the steppe looks eerily still, like the land itself is holding its breath. You sit beside the remnants of a dying fire, feeling the faint ache in your legs from riding and running with the herd. The horizon blurs into pale blue haze, and the world seems too large, too silent. Yet beneath that silence there's motion, the kind you don't hear, only sense. The motion of lineage, of generations whispering their design into the marrow of the living. You realize that by now, every practice you've witnessed, the womb training, the milk rites, the childhood trials, the merging with horses, all of it feeds one terrible and deliberate idea. Humanity can be sculpted. Flesh can be edited. Blood can be directed like a river. The Mongols didn't use the term genetics. They had no microscopes, no Mendelian charts, no knowledge of DNA coils. And yet, they behaved as though they understood inheritance intuitively. Their entire civilization was a living laboratory, where strength was selected, refined, and bred forward like traits in prized animals. In the camp you walk through today, the obsession is palpable. The elders sit by the fire murmuring about which families have produced the best riders this year. The talk is casual, but the undertone is sharp, statistical. The sons of the Borjigin line rarely fall from the saddle, one says. The daughters of the Jarchud bear easily, even in winter. Each comment is a judgment, a data point in an invisible chart that stretches across centuries. To the Mongols, weakness wasn't just a flaw, it was contagion. A defective trait could poison an entire bloodline if not corrected. So marriages were calculated, often across tribes and even conquered peoples, to balance perceived strengths and defects. The Khan's court became a breeding council as much as a ruling body. Every union was political, physical, and spiritual all at once. The mythic vocabulary around this grew elaborate. Strength wasn't merely muscular, it was cosmological. The shamans spoke of eagle eyes and falcon hearts, metaphors that doubled as phenotype categories. A child born with keen eyesight might be called descendant of the hawk. A boy who could endure pain without tears was blood of the wolf. The terms sound poetic, but they were effectively classifications, a taxonomy of potential. You follow one of these shamans to a clearing, where children are being inspected. He moves from one to the next, murmuring phrases that sound like blessings but feel like evaluations. He measures the width of a boy's shoulders with a leather cord, the span of a girl's fingers, the clarity of their gaze. When he finds what he's looking for, a posture too proud, an eye too steady, he smiles faintly and draws a symbol on the child's forehead with ash. Marked by sky, he says. Those marked are celebrated, those unmarked remain invisible. The children don't flinch. They've learned that destiny is written not in stars but in bone. A travelling Persian physician, captured and pressed into service by the Mongols, once wrote in his journal that they breed themselves as they breed their horses, favouring the sharp-boned and wide-eyed. He meant it as a criticism. Yet when you read it now, you feel the eerie modernity in it. Long before eugenics was coined as a term, here it lived as culture, instinctual, brutal, and horrifyingly effective. You hear stories of how the Khan's envoys, when annexing a new tribe, would request lists of its healthiest families. These were not for taxation, but for blood exchanges. The empire didn't merely conquer, it integrated biologically. A defeated people could preserve itself only by blending into the Mongol stock. their strongest absorbed, their weakest erased. It's easy to see why later historians described their expansion not only as military domination but as genetic colonization. The most striking example is found in the legend of the Golden Seed. Genghis Khan, they said, carried divine essence in his blood, an aura that made his descendants uniquely favoured by heaven. His sons, grandsons, and even illegitimate offspring were called Altan Orug, the Golden Line. To preserve that sacred essence, marriages were strictly monitored. The daughters of the Khan's line were married only to men of proven valour, sometimes chosen through single combat tournaments, where a warrior could win a royal bride by surviving impossible odds. But even more chilling is the reverse. Men of the Golden Line were often required to take wives from conquered nations to spread the sky's favour. You can feel the logic twisting in your gut. What begins as mysticism quickly becomes a mechanism for large-scale genetic projection. When historians today estimate that up to 16 million men may share a Y chromosome lineage tracing back to Genghis Khan, you realise this wasn't legend, it was deliberate policy. The Mongols saw reproduction not as intimacy, but as conquest extended through flesh. Each birth was another border pushed outward. You visit a tent near the edge of camp where midwives work. Inside, the air smells of herbs and blood. A woman gives birth while chanting through clenched teeth, and the others respond in rhythm. When the child emerges, slick and wailing, the midwife holds it up to the smoke hole and declares, "Another drop of the river." Outside, an elder records the birth in a small scroll case. He doesn't ask for the father's name, he already knows. He asks for the mother's stamina. That detail matters more. Mongols valued the mother's constitution as the truest predictor of survival. A strong mother meant strong milk, strong bones, strong offspring. In the society where bloodlines were currency, a woman's health was literal wealth. You can't help but think of modern genetic counsellors and family medical histories. The resemblance feels too close for comfort. There's a particular superstition, whispered among the tribes, that twins were dangerous. Not cursed, but confused, as if the sky, unsure which one to favour, might divide its blessing too thinly. In such cases, one twin might be symbolically adopted by another family to restore balance. Historians argue whether this was population management disguised as ritual. Either way, it shows how every anomaly became a data problem to be solved. One night, while the wind howls outside, you find yourself sitting by the fire with a veteran warrior named Arslan. His hair is streaked with silver, his eyes sharp as blades. "Do you know why we win?" he asks suddenly. You shake your head. He smiles grimly. "Because we do not lie to our blood. If a man is weak, we do not pretend he is strong. If a child fears, we do not tell him he is brave. We correct it." He takes a long drink of kumis, wipes his mouth and adds, "Other nations breed comfort. We breed truth." You realize it's not arrogance, it's conviction. They truly believe they were perfecting humanity. A strange tidbit from Chinese chroniclers records that Mongol astrologers sometimes linked physical features to planetary signs. Wide shoulders born under Mars signalled endurance, narrow hips under Mercury, agility. It sounds absurd, but it functioned as a primitive system of phenotyping. Even celestial superstition became data collection disguised as faith. As you move through the camp, you begin to feel the weight of it, the constant evaluation, the invisible scoring. Every glance is assessment, every rumour judgment of blood. You watch young men sparring in the dust, their faces hard with focus, aware that every movement might determine their future pairing, their chance to breed. Even laughter here is strategic. Reputation is inheritance. You pass a girl with false eyes who has just been chosen to marry one of the Khan's captains. Her mother weeps not from sorrow but from pride. "She will join the Iron Seed," the woman says. You ask what that means. She replies, "A line that never bends." Later, you learn that the Iron Seed refers to families that have never produced a coward or traitor. To them, this isn't metaphor, it's measurable record. Historians still argue whether this obsessive tracking truly made the Mongols stronger or simply reinforced their myths. One camp claims the empire's genetic legacy is proof of selective success. Another calls it coincidence amplified by scale. But one thing is clear, They acted as if destiny could be engineered, and that belief alone changed the world. There's a quiet horror in that thought, the recognition that ideology can replicate through generations just as genes do. The Mongols bred not only bodies but worldviews. Endurance, obedience, ruthlessness, these were inherited as surely as eye colour. At dusk, a ceremony begins by the river. Warriors and shamans gather holding torches that flicker in the wind. They chant the names of ancestors, each name followed by the animal totem of that line. It's both a prayer and a census. Borjigin, wolf. Taijiud, eagle. Ongirat, deer. The litany continues, rolling through centuries. When you reach the final name, Altan Arud, the crowd bows. The torches flare, and for a moment, the river glows gold with reflection. The shaman steps forward and says, "Blood remembers." It's a simple phrase, but it chills you. Because in their world, memory wasn't kept in stories, it was stored in veins. Later that night, you can't sleep. The camp is quiet except for the distant neighing of horses. You stare up at the stars and think about how small your body feels beneath that enormous indifferent sky. The Mongols believed those stars were eyes, watching to ensure every drop of blood fulfilled its purpose. You wonder what it would be like to live knowing your ancestors might be disappointed if you merely rested. Somewhere nearby, you hear a lullaby. A mother sings softly to her baby, "Sleep, my hawk, the wind will carve your wings. Sleep, my wolf, the moon remembers your name." Her voice is tender, but the words are a command. Even in sleep, the next generation is being moulded. You close your eyes, and for a moment you imagine the empire as one vast organism. Arteries of riders, veins of horses, hearts beating in time with thunder. The concept is terrifying and beautiful, a civilization that turned itself into its own breeding program. And as the wind sweeps across the steppe, you feel it in your chest, the pulse of that ancient ambition, still echoing in the blood of millions. The steppe has changed colour again. It always does. One month it's silver green, another it's gold, and now it burns in shades of rust under the late summer sun. But even as the grass dries and the air grows thin, the Mongols continue to move, wave after wave of riders, caravans and herds crossing what feels like the skin of the earth itself. You ride with them, trying to understand what the empire looks like when it stops expanding. Only, it never really does. Expansion is not an act, it's a metabolism. Ahead, a gust plume rises, another city on the horizon, another conquest underway, and somewhere in the endless bureaucracy of tents and scrolls, another list is already being made. Not a list of spoils or casualties, a list of people, the raw material of the next generation. To the Mongols, war is not just about killing, it's about collecting. Every conquest feeds the breeding machine of the empire. Conquered peoples aren't merely subdued, they're sorted. The process is disturbingly efficient. After each victory, Genghis Khan's envoys record the captives by category: artisans, scholars, warriors, herders, women of childbearing age. You can see the logic forming like a lattice of iron. Everything the empire touches becomes part of its genetic library. You arrive at one such sorting ground outside the smoking ruins of Nishapur. The air stinks of ash, but the order is clinical. Men kneel in rows. Women are gathered separately, guarded but unharmed. Scribes move among them, noting physical attributes the way horse traders assess animals. One writes, "Tall men of strong chest, send to Khwarezm front." Another, "Women with wide hips and steady eyes, reserve for noble lines." It's obscene, yes, but in the Mongol worldview, it's organization. They see this as harvest, not horror. Where others see ruin, they see resources. A captured Persian physician nearby mutters to himself, "They reap as if the world were wheat." You can't disagree. What emerges from this policy is something monstrous and brilliant. Assimilation as biology. Genghis Khan's conquests weren't simply territorial, they were reproductive. Every captured artisan, every enslaved soldier, every bride taken from a distant tribe contributes to a deliberate genetic fusion that strengthens the whole. In the Khan's mind, it's evolution by conquest. The weak die, the strong join. The empire grows not just in land, but in blood. One of his generals, Subutai, supposedly said, "The earth is many peoples, but only one kind of strength." The Mongols believed they were collecting that strength like minerals from a mine. When a region fell, they took its best qualities with them: courage from the Turks, beauty from the Persians, endurance from the Tanguts, cunning from the Chinese. The empire became a living mosaic of selected traits. And in this horrifying logic, something astonishing happens. The Mongols, once an isolated cluster of tribes, begin to evolve at a pace no society has ever matched. Their faces, languages, and customs blend like metals in a forge. The empire becomes less Mongol and more engineered humanity. You stand in the marketplace of a conquered city, watching as it's transformed into a sorting yard. Horses neigh beside wagons full of scrolls, spices, and children. The women sing low songs to keep the infants quiet. The men stare at the ground. You think of the irony, how in some empires captured people are stripped of identity. Here, they are repurposed. A soldier beside you, a grizzled veteran, shrugs when you ask how he feels about it. We don't destroy, he says simply. We improve. The phrase is chilling in its conviction. That improvement extends even to marriage. The Khan's administrators issue decrees pairing Mongol warriors with women from conquered lands. The unions are not forced in the usual sense. They're formalized, sometimes celebrated with ritual. But they are strategic. A warrior gains legitimacy through marriage to a noble woman of the conquered elite, while her family gains protection through blood. In the Mongol mind, love is irrelevant. Lineage is diplomacy. Historians still debate whether this was a form of proto-integration policy or organized eugenics. Some records suggest that these marriages stabilized conquered territories, producing hybrid dynasties loyal to the empire. Others argue that it was simple breeding control disguised as policy. Either way, it achieved what centuries of diplomacy could not: a population too mixed to rebel effectively. One Persian chronicler described a phenomenon bitterly. We were not merely conquered, we were absorbed. There's an old saying attributed to Genghis himself: the greatest joy is to unite the divided. Scholars usually interpret it politically, but standing here you suspect it also meant biologically. He wasn't just uniting nations, he was uniting bloodlines. Later, as dusk falls, you walk through the women's camp. It's quiet, almost serene. Fires burn low, and the smell of milk and smoke fills the air. Women from every corner of Asia sit together, speaking in a dozen tongues. Some sew, some sing, some stare into the flames. Among them, Mongol midwives move like silent architects, noting pregnancies, checking infants, murmuring blessings. You realize this is the empire's true nursery, the forge of its future. One of the women notices your gaze and says softly, "The sky mixes us as it pleases." Her tone carries no bitterness, only resignation. "My son will be half of two worlds," she adds, "and stronger than either." You feel the full gravity of that sentence. The Mongols' terrifying genius wasn't just that they conquered. It's that they convinced the conquered to believe in the logic of their conquest. They framed assimilation as divine will. The eternal blue sky wanted strength, not purity. Diversity was weaponized, and so what begins as coercion slowly transforms into culture. The children born of these unions are raised as Mongols first, their mixed heritage reframed as celestial selection. If the sky made you survive, the elders say, then you are already one of us. Over time, the empire's army becomes a genetic rainbow. Warriors with Persian eyes, Chinese cheekbones, Turkic shoulders, and Mongol hearts. Even language bends to this hybridization. Words from conquered lands merge with steppe idioms. A military officer might curse in Arabic, pray in Mongolian, and toast in Chinese all in one evening. What looks like chaos is actually cohesion. Historians still argue whether this cultural blending was deliberate genius or accidental consequence. Some call it the first globalization. Others call it organized entropy. But the Mongols called it destiny. There's a curious note from a captured Venetian merchant who observed, "They breed as though the earth were their wife." He meant it mockingly, but the description feels disturbingly accurate. The Mongols treated the entire world as one vast womb from which new strength could be born. You find yourself recalling earlier nights, the mothers riding through storms, the children running with horses, the scribes recording bloodlines. All of it leads to this. The steppe now extends into every conquered vein. The genetic philosophy that began as survival strategy has become imperial dogma. At the edge of camp, you meet a young half-Chinese, half-Mongol boy tending horses. He grins shyly when you speak to him. "My father rides with Batu," he says proudly. "He says the sky gave me two eyes from two worlds, so I see father." It's a child's boast, but behind it lies centuries of ideology. Belief that hybrid blood equals heightened power. The empire reinforces this belief constantly. Mixed children receive privileged education. Shamans proclaim that such births are blessed. Over generations, this produces not just loyalty but pride. The empire's diversity becomes its armor. You think of the Roman Empire, which spread by citizenship, of Alexander's, which spread by culture, the Mongols spread by lineage. Yet beneath the triumph lies unease. You notice something in the elders' eyes, fear. For every success story, there are whispers of deformities, sickness, strange births. Shamans explain these away as the sky's correction, but you can feel their discomfort. Even a system built on strength must face entropy. The more they mix, the more unpredictable the outcomes become. The perfection they chase begins to fracture its edges. One night, sitting by the fire, you overhear a grim conversation between two commanders. "Our sons are not like us," one says quietly. "They sleep too long. They question too much." The other replies, "Maybe that is the sky's way of testing whether we have bred gods or ghosts." You look around and realize that this anxiety, this fear that improvement might one day undo itself, is the price of their experiment. When you play at evolution, you also invite mutation. Still, the machine rolls on. The next morning, the Khan's banner rises above the horizon again, shimmering with its black horsehair tails. Riders assemble. Women gather their children. Scribes unroll new scrolls. The next campaign is already being planned, not merely to conquer, but to replenish. Every victory adds new blood. Every surrender a new chapter in the genetic ledger. You ride out with the army as the steppe winds roar behind you. You pass fields of skulls bleached white by sun and time, monuments to both extinction and creation. The Mongols never see contradiction in this. Death and birth are twin halves of the same design. When night falls, you look back at the flickering fires of the mobile camps trailing the Omi. From above, they would look like constellations, stars migrating across the earth. You think of how each light marks not just a soldier or a family, but a lineage being rewritten. And you finally understand the Mongols didn't just reshape borders, they rewired humanity. Theirs was not an empire of stone or scripture, it was an empire of flesh. The harvest never ends. The steppe is quiet again, but it's the silence of aftermath, the kind that hums like a drawn bowstring ready to release. You sit at the edge of a campfire, its flames flickering low against a dark sky, and you realize the empire has entered a new phase of its terrible growth. The initial frenzy of conquest has slowed. The world is no longer something to conquer, it's something to populate, to seed. And in the centre of it all, myth, man, and mechanism, is one name whispered everywhere, from the Volga to the Yellow Sea, Genghis Khan. He's gone now, his body hidden in an unmarked grave somewhere under these rolling plains. But his presence has not faded, it has multiplied. Quite literally, everywhere you go people claim descent from him. The proud, the humble, the cruel, the kind, each one says, "I am of the Khan's blood." At first it sounds like flattery, the sort of exaggerated lineage people invent for power, but the numbers don't lie. The Empire's breeding machine, carefully constructed across generations, has succeeded too well. Historians centuries later will discover through genetic mapping what the Mongols already knew through instinct. One man's seed can become a civilization. The legend begins in his lifetime. Genghis Khan was not just conqueror, he was progenitor. His power was not only political, it was reproductive. Among his followers it was said that the Khan's blood is the sky's favour made flesh. To bear his child was an honour, to father one by his daughter a binding of fates. You travel through one of his descendant camps, a sprawling settlement ruled by a prince of the Golden Line. Everywhere you look, the Khan's legacy breathes in faces. Sharp cheekbones, deep-set eyes, a calm, almost predatory composure. The resemblance is uncanny, and it isn't coincidence. Generations of selective union have reinforced the founder's features, as if the empire itself was sculpting statues out of humility. In the great tent, a portrait hangs, not painted but stitched from dyed horsehair. It shows Genghis astride a black stallion, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on something beyond time. Beneath the image, the inscription reads, "His veins became rivers." Because that's precisely what happened. By decree, the direct descendants of Genghis Khan, the Altan Urug, the Golden Line, were granted breeding privileges above all others. Their unions were orchestrated by councils of elders, ensuring that his divine essence was distributed strategically across regions and classes. In practice, this meant that any territory under Mongol control eventually hosted descendants of the Khan. Princes in Persia, governors in China, Khans in the Russian steppe, all bore the same mythic lineage. It was dynasty not as politics, but as genetic diffusion. One chronicler wrote, "Wherever his horse drank, his children will someday walk." It was prophecy, and it proved true. You sit with a scholar captured from Samarkand, who now serves as the Khan's genealogist. His name is Jalal, and his tent is filled with scrolls charting marriages across continents. He shows you a map drawn not by rivers and mountains, but by bloodlines, crimson threads connecting families from Hungary to Korea. "See," he says proudly, "how the sky seed spreads. We measure not land, but lineage." His eyes gleam with zeal, and you realize that this is faith disguised as record-keeping. You ask him if he truly believes the blood of one man can shape the world. He smiles thinly. "Do you not see it already has?" Historians still argue about the numbers. Some say Genghis fathered hundreds of children directly, through wives, concubines, and captives. Others believe his sons and grandsons multiplied the legacy exponentially. But whether the figure is hundreds or thousands, the truth is clear. The empire turned his fertility into divine mandate. The phrase "to share the Khan's blood" became both blessing and command. You hear rumours that the Khan's descendants were measured and ranked by resemblance. A strong jaw, a commanding gaze, these were signs of the true seed. Others, with weaker features, were quietly sidelined in the inheritance line. Over time, these judgments codified into hierarchy. Those closest in blood, those further diluted, and those touched only symbolically. The empire had created a literal spectrum of worth based on genealogy. It's difficult not to see the echo of modern notions of blood purity, except the Mongols, ironically, valued strength over ethnicity. The seed wasn't racial, it was functional. Denghis's heirs could marry Persian or Chinese nobles so long as the resulting offspring bore power. The only unacceptable trait was frailty. You walk through the women's quarters and notice how meticulously children are observed. Midwives report to clerks, clerks to scribes. Babies are weighed, inspected, recorded. One cries loudly, strong lungs. Another lies silent, barely moving. The midwife frowns. "Too quiet," she whispers. "The sky may not keep him." The scribe nods solemnly and writes something down. No further words are needed. It's horrifyingly systematic. You think of how other empires glorified their rulers through monuments or coins. The Mongols built their monument out of chromosomes. There's a peculiar tidbit from Persian sources. Every new city conquered by the Mongols supposedly had a house of the Khan's seed, where local nobles would send their daughters as a gesture of submission. Historians still argue whether such places truly existed or were propaganda inventions by fearful chroniclers. But in spirit they fit perfectly into the empire's logic. Obedience as reproduction, loyalty as fertility. In some regions, the strategy took a softer form. Sons of Mongol princes were married into native dynasties, binding nations through blood rather than treaties. It was genius in its coldness. No need for long sieges or puppet governments when inheritance itself ensured future allegiance. "What we conquer once by sword," an old proverb said, "we keep forever by room." Centuries later, this biological empire still lingers invisibly. Modern geneticists tracing Y chromosome haplogroups across Eurasia find an uncanny pattern, a cluster centered on Mongolia, radiating outward like a map of conquest. Approximately 1 in 200 men alive today may descend from that single line. It is perhaps the most enduring empire ever built, not of borders, but of inheritance. You wonder what Genghis would think if he could see it, the invisible network of his descendants spanning continents. Perhaps he would smile that quiet, terrifying smile described by every chronicler who met him. For the Khan, victory was never temporary. His ambition was immortality, and he found it, not in monuments or scripture, but in biology. Yet among the scholars of his court there were doubts. One old advisor, it said, warned him, "Even the sky's seed can rot if it spreads without wisdom." The Khan reportedly replied, "Then let it rot across the whole earth." Whether apocryphal or not, it captures the essence of his philosophy. Expansion was its own justification. As you travel farther west, you encounter villages where people still bear traces of the Mongol line. High cheekbones, almond eyes, a peculiar calm in their posture. They live as Persians or Turks or Russians now, but the blood remains. You realize you are walking through a living museum of invisible inheritance. One evening you sit by a small oasis where traders gather. An old man approaches, wrapped in tattered silk. He calls himself a descendant of Genghis, though so do half the men here. You humour him, asking how he knows. He points to a small scar above his right eye. "All my fathers had it," he says. The sky marks its own. He laughs, but there's pride in his voice. It's both absurd and deeply human, the need to trace greatness through blood, to believe that destiny can be inherited like property. And yet, the Mongols turn that instinct into empire. A strange mixture of awe and dread fills you. You think about how one man's life, shaped by the brutal clarity of the steppe, could ripple forward into millions of bodies centuries later. His wars ended, his bones vanished, yet his biology endures like a code that refuses deletion. Historians still argue whether Genghis truly intended this or whether it was accident, an outcome of conquest and appetite. But intent almost doesn't matter. The result is undeniable. His seed rewrote the human map. You lie awake that night, staring at the constellations. They look the same as they must have to him, the same cold stars under which he made his vow to unite the world. Somewhere in their indifferent light, you sense the haunting symmetry between sky and blood, both endless, both untraceable, both reflections of each other. A woman nearby hums a lullaby to her child. You catch a fragment of the words. The horse runs forever, the seed never sleeps. It's an old Mongol proverb turned nursery song. The empire has domesticated even its ambition. You think of how strange and terrible immortality must feel, not his spirit or fame, but his multiplication. The man who united the world now lives scattered within it, in faces that will never know his name. And as the dawn light spills across the plains, you finally understand the scale of what the Mongols created. The steppe wind may erase footprints, the years may erase cities, but blood is harder to forget. It flows quietly beneath time, carrying the empire onward through veins instead of banners. You close your eyes and feel that wind on your face, the same wind that once carried a rider named Temujin across these plains, who believed that strength could outlive death if only it learned to reproduce. He was right. The next day begins with the sound of wooden drums. They echo across the plain, measured, rhythmic, each strike like a heartbeat carved into the air. When you follow the sound, you find yourself standing before a vast circle of yurts, their white felt walls gleaming in the morning sun. Above the entrance to the largest tent hangs a carved bone plaque etched with the words, "To serve the sky, one must unlearn the self." It's one of the empire's hidden institutions, what the Mongols called the Biyin Oron, the house of flesh and bone, a school in the barest sense, but not for reading or writing. Here they teach something else entirely, the transformation of body into weapon, of child into instrument. You step inside the main tent and the smell hits you first. Smoke, sweat, animal hide, and something faintly metallic. Rows of young men and women kneel on woven mats, motionless except for the steady rise and fall of their chests. They are not praying, they are being erased. At the centre, a shaman in black wolf fur circles slowly, tapping a bone staff against the ground in perfect rhythm. With each tap, the students whisper a single word, kun, human, over and over. The sound becomes mechanical, like chanting machines winding down their own identities. The shaman's voice cuts through. To serve the sky, you must first kill the eye. It's both terrifying and mesmerizing. The Mongols have built not just an army, but an assembly line of consciousness. The schools of flesh and bone exist across the empire, half monastery, half barracks. Each student is selected for endurance, precision, and obedience. They are not chained, yet none would dream of leaving. To them, the steppe is a mirror, and the sky watches every thought. In one corner, a group of younger recruits practices the art of stillness. They kneel in freezing water, eyes open, back straight, hands resting on their thighs. You count the minutes. 5, 10, 15. No movement. The instructor murmurs, "Pain is wind, let it pass through you." When one boy begins to shake, he is not struck or scolded. Instead, the teacher pours a bowl of warm milk over his head and says quietly, "You are too alive." The boy lowers his eyes in shame. Historians still debate whether these institutions were spiritual retreats or military factories. Some call them the earliest psychological conditioning centers in history. Others see them as elaborate rituals for control. Whatever the label, the goal is the same: to sculpt soldiers who move and think like extensions of a single will. You wander between the tents, watching as another group trains with bows. But this is no ordinary archery. Each student is blindfolded. They draw, breathe, release, all guided only by sound. The instructor claps once, twice, and the arrows fly toward a target they cannot see. The thuds come in unison, unnervingly accurate. You feel a chill. These aren't warriors. They're sensory algorithms, perfected through repetition. A curious detail from a captured Chinese chronicler describes these schools as factories where obedience is distilled like milk. The phrase sounds poetic, but the reality here feels literal. Every gesture, every reflex, every emotion is ground down until only efficiency remains. At noon, the gong sounds, a deep, bone-vibrating note that rolls through the camp. It signals the meal of endurance. The students gather in a line, each handed a single handful of boiled grain. They bow to the bowl before eating. When one asks for more, the teacher smiles faintly. "You still think of hunger," he says. "Good, you still have something to lose." Then he walks away. The boy does not ask again. It's not starvation, it's calibration. The Mongols believed that strength came from measured deprivation. Too much comfort breeds complacency, too much suffering kills purpose. The right amount, constant, deliberate tension creates transformation. In another tent, the students study movement. They run in circles around a central pole, each stride timed to the rhythm of a drum. Occasionally, an instructor strikes the drum twice instead of once. Instantly, every student drops flat to the ground, as if a single brain controlled them. Dust rises in perfect synchrony. He realized this is how Mongol units later moved in battle, without hesitation, as if telepathic. This is where that terrifying discipline was born. You overhear one teacher telling a new recruit, "You are not your name, your clan, or your thought. You are motion." The words are repeated like scripture. You write them down in your mind, because they encapsulate the Mongol genius perfectly. Motion as religion. There's an old legend about one of these schools, a boy who disobeyed. When told to strike a training partner, he hesitated. The instructor ordered him to dig a pit and stand in it up to his waist for a full day. At dusk, the shaman approached and said, "Your fear has taken root." The boy filled the pit around himself with earth until only his head was visible. Then he was left overnight under the stars. In the morning, when they dug him out, his expression hadn't changed. The record simply says, he no longer trembled. You can't tell if it's myth or truth, but it fits the Empire's logic perfectly. Transformation through discomfort. Transcendence through control. The shaman leading the session gestures for you to follow him to the back of the tent. There, carved into the wall, is a crude diagram, an outline of a human body filled with small black circles. Each dot marks a place where pain can be turned into strength. The flesh remembers, he says quietly, so we teach it. He presses one finger to your shoulder, hard enough to hurt. This spot, he explains, holds hesitation. Strike it often, and it forgets fear. It's primitive neuroscience disguised as mysticism. Historians still argue about how literal this doctrine was. Some believe the Mongols had a rough understanding of what modern science calls conditioning, that repeated stimuli can reshape behavior. Others think it was ritualistic metaphor. Either way, the outcome is clear. They produced soldiers whose reflexes were indistinguishable from instincts. The afternoon lesson begins, the song of silence. Each student must stand in total stillness while the instructors whisper insults and threats into their ears. You will die alone. Your horse will leave you. Your blood will freeze. The goal isn't endurance of pain, but mastery over reaction. Only those who remain utterly still are considered ready to lead. One boy flinches when someone hisses. Your mother's bones feed the grass. Instantly, 2 assistants pull him out of the circle and sit him beside the fire. The shaman hands him a bowl of cold water. "Drink," he says. "Taste how your fear cools your blood." Then, more softly, return when you can hear the words without believing them. It's not punishment, it's therapy. centuries ahead of its time. They're teaching cognitive control before psychology even exists. A quirky account from a Persian observer tells of Mongol captains who could sleep soundly under arrow fire and wake instantly at the sound of a horse neighing. He thought it sorcery. Now, watching these students, you see it's simply training, body and mind rewired to ignore what doesn't matter. At dusk, the final ritual begins. The students sit in a wide circle. A drumbeat rises slowly, joined by chanting, low droning hypnotic. The shaman walks among them, sprinkling ashes over their heads. You have no mother, he intones. You have no father. The sky bore you. The wind feeds you. The words strip them of lineage, reassigning their identity to something cosmic. This is the true heart of the schools of flesh and bone, unmaking the person to make the weapon. You notice tears glistening on some faces, but they are silent. The sound of weeping here is like rain on dry soil, necessary, never pitied. As night falls, the trainees are dismissed to sleep. They don't lie in tents, but outside, under the stars, backs pressed against the earth. The shaman says it keeps them humble. The ground remembers what it made. You linger by the fire with one of the instructors, a woman named Yesagin. Her voice is rough, but her eyes are kind. Why such harsh lessons, you ask? She sighs faintly. Because the world is harsher, we are just its mirror. She stirs the embers with a stick. We make them strong not to serve us, but to outlast us. That is the sky's will. You realize that despite its cruelty, there's a strange tenderness buried within the system. The Mongols weren't trying to destroy humanity, they were trying to control it, to perfect it before the world could break it first. Historians still argue whether such conditioning robbed them of compassion or gave them more of it, focused and precise. The truth probably lies somewhere between. As the fire dies, you look out across the sleeping field of bodies, rows upon rows of young trainees, their breathing shallow, synchronized like waves. You think of how this will echo centuries later, in every disciplined army, every regiment drilled to think as one. The Mongols didn't invent warfare, they invented systematic resilience. Somewhere, a horse nickers softly, the wind stirs the grass. You feel the faint tremor of the drums fade into your heartbeat. The line between you and them blurs. For a fleeting moment, you too become still, breath merging with the rhythm of the earth. And you understand, in a way you wish you didn't, why they called it the House of Flesh and Bone. Because what they were really building wasn't soldiers at all. It was a new kind of human. The wind shifts again by morning. It carries a smell you haven't encountered before, a pungent, almost medicinal scent of herbs, oil, and blood. They follow it past the main encampment, down a slope where the grass thins into stony ground. At first you think it's another training site, maybe a forge or a healer's tent. But as you draw closer, the air grows heavy, the sounds quieter. Even the horses graze at a distance. You soon realize you've stumbled upon one of the Empire's strangest, least spoken of places. They call it the Hakura, the place of silence. It's neither monastery nor battlefield. It's something in between. The shaman's laboratory. A field hospital, an experiment that pretends not to exist. At its entrance stands a guard wearing a wolf's skull as a mask. He doesn't speak. He simply lifts the flak of the tent and motions for you to enter. Inside, the air is thick with smoke. The floor is strewn with bundles of dried plants, some familiar, others alien, their odours mingling into a heady mix that burns the back of your throat. In the dim light you see shapes lying on mats, men, women, sometimes even children. Their bodies are marked with symbols painted in red. Some are still. Others twitch or mumble incoherently. Around them a group of figures moves in silence. Herbalists, midwives, shamans and physicians, all working in uneasy collaboration. A woman in a dark robe notices you and whispers, "Do not speak here." The air listens. She hands you a cloth to cover your mouth and gestures to a table at the back. On it lie rows of clay jars, each labelled in the Mongol script: wolf's blood, mare's marrow, eagle heart, iron flour. You watch as one of the healers grinds powder from a dried organ, mixes it into a bowl of milk, and feeds it to a man whose skin gleams with sweat. The man shudders, gasps, then stills. You want to ask what's happening, but words feel sacrilegious in this place. One of the assistants, a former Persian alchemist named Farid, notices your confusion. He leans close and murmurs in broken Mongolian. They test strength. They test endurance. They test what the sky will tolerate. His eyes dart nervously toward a curtain at the far end of the tent. Beyond it, you can hear muffled groans. It hits you then. This isn't healing. This is refinement. The Mongols have conquered the world, but they still hunger for control. Control over nature, over the body, over death itself. The steppe has already bred its people to be strong. Now it demands more. Perfection isn't enough. They want transcendence. You part the curtain and immediately wish you hadn't. In the chamber beyond, the air is colder. A single fire burns in the centre, casting long shadows against the walls. Around it, a circle of volunteers. Yes, volunteers. Sit with their arms outstretched over the flames, palms blistering, eyes closed. A shaman walks among them, whispering blessings while sprinkling powdered herbs into the fire. The smoke turns greenish, acrid. The volunteers breathe it deeply. When they exhale, their faces relax, serene. Farid says beside you, "Some survive, some do not." He gestures toward a wall of wrapped bundles in the corner. You understand what he means. You've seen cruelty before, but this feels different. This isn't punishment or sadism, it's devotion. The Mongols have turned suffering into ritual science. They believe the body is clay shaped by will, that if enough pain is endured with faith, something new will emerge, a being stronger, faster, more resistant than before. Historians still argue whether these experiments were superstition or proto-medicine. Some think the Mongols used herbal tonics and stress exposure to enhance performance, primitive performance science, centuries ahead of its time. Others believe it was spiritual theatre, but the truth is likely both. They didn't separate belief from biology. In another corner, you see healers mixing a thick paste from animal fat and herbs. One rubs it onto a soldier's wounds, which steam faintly as the salve takes effect. The smell is nauseating, but the man doesn't cry out. Wolf oil, Farid explains. They say it pulls the spirit of the beast into the blood. You watch his skin darken slightly where the paste spreads. It looks unnatural, but his breathing steadies. Moments later he sits up, eyes glassy, and whispers, "The cold is gone." Another test begins. A group of young riders steps into the tent carrying flasks of dark liquid. From the iron flower, a shaman explains. It grows where lightning strikes. The riders each take a swallow, grimace, and begin pacing in circles. Their heartbeats quicken, their pupils widen. They look euphoric, almost divine. "It burns away weakness," she says softly, "or burns away everything." Two collapse within minutes. No one rushes to help. The survivors keep walking. You realize now that the Mongols have entered a new kind of conquest, not over people, but over human limitation itself. A strange tidbit survives from the notes of a captured physician. He describes infusions made from horse blood, fermented milk, and crushed bone. These mixtures were given to soldiers before long campaigns. Many modern historians dismiss them as myth, but others point out that such a concoction, full of electrolytes, protein and iron, could indeed sustain life for days. The line between magic and science blurs entirely here. The shaman leading the rituals turns towards you suddenly. Her face is painted white, her eyes ringed in soot. "Do you fear pain?" she asks, voice quiet but commanding. You hesitate. "Yes," you admit. She smiles, a faint pitying smile. "Then you are still human." She gestures toward the men by the fire. They are becoming something else. The phrase chills you more than the air ever could. At dusk you sit outside trying to clear your lungs of smoke. The steppe wind tastes clean by comparison. You hear low chanting from within the tent, mixed with the occasional scream that turns to laughter halfway through. You think of how far this empire has come, from the simplicity of horses and bows to this nightmarish fusion of medicine, mysticism, and militarism. A scholar once wrote that the Mongols saw no boundary between spirit and sinew. He meant it as metaphor, but here it's literal. Every cell, every breath, every heartbeat is political. The Empire is now experimenting on its own essence. You notice Farid standing beside you, staring at the darkening horizon. His expression is weary. Do you believe this will work, you ask? He shakes his head slowly. It already has, he replies. They do not tire, they do not freeze, they survive wounds that would kill others. The sky listens to them. He looks at his trembling hands. But the cost, he stops himself, unable to finish. Later, after the fires dim, you sneak back inside. The air is still thick with smoke and herbs. Most of the subjects sleep, their faces calm, their bodies twitching slightly as if dreaming. You approach one man lying apart from the rest. His skin glows faintly in the firelight, a sheen of sweat coating every inch. His eyes open suddenly, staring straight into yours. "I saw it," he whispers hoarsely. "This guy's mouth." "What did it say?" you ask, before you can stop yourself. He smiles weakly. It said, "Keep breathing." You step back, unsettled. That's all they ever wanted, to keep breathing longer, harder, further than any other people on Earth. Historians still debate whether these silent experiments were widespread or limited to certain elite units. Some claim they were precursors to what modern science calls stress inoculation and chemical enhancement. Others say they were myths used to terrify enemies, but the Mongols themselves never wrote about them. Their silence was intentional. In their culture, true power was never spoken aloud. You think back to the earlier generations, the mothers riding through storms, the children running with horses, the blood mixed with milk. All of it is led here. The breeding, the training, the conditioning, it's culminated in the secret chamber where humanity is melted and reforged. The most haunting thought is that maybe they didn't see it as cruelty at all. Maybe they saw it as progress. Outside, thunder rolls in the distance, though the sky is clear. The wind carries the scent of rain, of life, of the endless experiment that is existence itself. You close your eyes and imagine the Empire spreading not just across geography, but through the very biology of its people. Each generation tougher, leaner, less fragile, less human. Somewhere inside, a man begins to laugh softly, deliriously. Another joins him. Soon the sound spreads, ragged, echoing like wind catching in dry reeds. It's not madness exactly. It's something worse. It's triumph. You open your eyes and look toward the horizon, where lightning finally splits the sky. For an instant, it illuminates the vast herd of horses grazing just beyond the tents. They stand perfectly still, heads raised as if listening to the laughter. The wind dies. The laughter stops. Only silence remains, thick, living, omnipresent. The steppe breathes once more. And you know that whatever was being tested here has already escaped the tent. It lives now in the bloodstream of the Empire, in the quiet rhythm of hooves pounding across continents, in every soldier who no longer feels pain, and every child born immune to fear. The experiment, you realize, was never meant to stay silent. It was meant to echo. The dawn breaks red and windless. The horizon glows like a strip of burning copper, and for the first time in days the air smells of rain. You rise from your mat, muscles aching, and realize that the men are gone. The herds are gone. The camp is silent, except for the fluttering of tent flaps and the faint, low hum of women's voices. It's the day of the mothers, the only day in the Mongol year when men are forbidden to lead. No orders are shouted, no horses are saddled. Instead, the Empire's entire machinery stops, or rather, it changes hands. You follow the voices through the mist until you reach a wide clearing surrounded by birch trees. Hundreds of women stand in concentric circles, their hair braided with red thread, their hands clasped before them. In the centre is a small fire, burning low, sending curls of smoke into the cold air. At first, the scene feels peaceful. Then you realize what you're hearing is not song, it's invocation. The sound rises and falls in waves, a rhythmic chant that makes the ground seem to vibrate. The leader, an old woman with snow-white braids and a robe of wolf fur, raises a calf staff and shouts, "We made the bones, we made the blood." The crowd answers as one, "We made the storm." It hits you then. These are not merely mothers. They are engineers of the Empire's biology, its continuity, its will. The men may have ridden to war, But the real empire was built in tents like these, under hands like theirs. The leader turns toward the assembled crowd and continues. When men sleep, we dream. When they die, we plant. Her voice cracks the air like thunder. We decide what is born. You see it now, what historians later call the quiet dominion. While chroniclers celebrated Genghis and his generals, it was the women who decided which children survived, which lineages were encouraged, which were culled. This day, the Day of the Mothers, was both ritual and regulation. Nearby, younger women kneel around large bronze basins filled with mare's milk and blood, mixing them by hand. Their arms glisten with the liquid, and as they stir they whisper the names of ancestors, the names of unborn children. One girl begins to cry softly, overwhelmed by the gravity of it. The elder beside her leans in and says gently, "Do not fear. Fear feeds the weak. The sky will taste your courage." She dips a small gourd into the mixture and drinks. The others follow, each sip symbolic of strength passed forward. It's both beautiful and deeply unsettling. You sit beside an old healer named Odon, who tells you that for centuries, Mongol women managed not just households but genetics. They tracked births, traits, even illnesses across generations. "We remember who had milk enough for 3, she says. "We remember who could run in labour and whose sons never fell in battle." Her wrinkled hands trace invisible lines in the air. The sky gives us memory longer than scrolls. She tells you how, during campaigns, the women decided which children would be sent to the herding schools and which would be raised as artisans or priests. "We do not love them less," she adds softly. We love them for purpose. It dawns on you that the Mongol breeding system was never simply masculine. The men fought and spread their seed, but the women managed its outcomes. The empire was in many ways a matriarchy disguised as a conquest machine. The womb was the true forge. In one corner, you notice a small enclosure where newborns are wrapped in amel skins and placed in shallow baskets. Each is marked with a symbol written in ash: a wolf, a hawk, a tree. These are the marks of breath, signs assigned after birth to predict temperament and destiny. The midwives debate quietly over each mark. A baby who clenches its fists is given the wolf. One who lies still receives the tree. "We'll listen to what they tell us," Odon murmurs. "They remember the sky better than we do." Historians still argue whether this practice was ritual or record-keeping. Some claim the symbols acted as a primitive form of genetic labelling, tracking inherited traits through visual codes. Others see it as spiritual folklore, but you can tell that to these women, it's both. The sacred and the scientific have no boundary here. A group of young mothers begins a procession around the clearing, carrying torches. Each holds a strip of cloth tied with horsehair, the string of lineage. At the head of the line, the white-haired matriarch shouts, "What do we carry?" The women answer in unison, "Storms and suns." Then they cast the burning cloths into the fire. The smell of scorched hair rises into the wind. Odon explains, "We burn the old threads each year. The new ones will tie stronger." Her eyes gleam. "Weak lines must end before they break us." It's a ruthless practicality disguised as devotion. You realize that this ritual likely served another function: population control. Families whose offspring showed weakness or illness were quietly discouraged from continuing. Some infants, history whispers, never woke from their swaddling blankets. Others were sent away into the wild to let the sky decide. And yet, within this cruelty, you feel an odd tenderness. These women mourn, but they do not regret. To them, love means ensuring the tribe's survival, even if it means thinning its own roots. As the sun climbs higher, the ceremony changes tone. Drums replace chanting. The women begin to move, their bodies swaying in perfect rhythm, feet stomping the earth in circles. The ground trembles, dust rises. You realize they're dancing, wildly, fiercely, like storms given flesh. "The sky dances in us," the leader shouts. "When we bleed, it rains." You see it now, fertility and weather, birth and battle, all intertwined in one grand cosmology. For the Mongols, creation and destruction were twins, not opposites. A woman's labour mirrored a warrior's struggle. Bloodshed was not tragedy, it was continuity. A quirky tidbit from a 13th century Persian traveller mentions this festival, calling it the day when the mothers roar. He wrote that no man dared to interrupt, for their eyes were like fire and their voices like thunder. Historians once dismissed this as exaggeration. Standing here, you believe every word. After the dance, the mothers rest. They sit in small groups, sharing kermis and stories of their sons. You overhear snippets, tales of bravery, of loss, of children who became the wind. The dawn leads close again. You see, she says, men believe they build empires, but we build the ones who build them. Her words settle heavy in your chest. A young woman joins you, carrying her infant. The baby's tiny face is smudged with ash in the shape of a bird. He was born during thunder, she says proudly. We call him Rook. She smiles, but there's steel in her tone. He will ride before he walks. She unwraps the baby briefly to show you his feet. Around his ankles are tied small iron bells. When he moves, the sky listens, she says. The bells jingle faintly, their sound both innocent and eerie. Historians still debate how such symbolic acts influenced the Mongol worldview. Some see it as early behavioural conditioning, training children from birth to associate sound, motion and strength. Others argue it was mythic theatre, designed to reinforce identity. Either way, the result was the same. Every child born into this culture carried destiny like armour. Rain falls in sheets, pounding the tents, darkening the soil. The women laugh and raise their arms to it. You watch as they lift their infants high, letting the rain wash over them. The old leader shouts, "The sky blesses what we built!" The sound of thunder rolls across the plains, echoing like the hooves of invisible riders. When the storm ends, the air is electric, crackling with ozone. Steam rises from the soaked grass. The women gather the newborns, wrapping them in furs, whispering lullabies that sound like incantations. Sleep, little storm. Grow strong, not soft. Sleep until thunder wakes you. The melody carries across the clearing, haunting and ancient. They realize that this is how the next generation begins, not with conquest, but with song. As the day ends, the men begin to return from the horizon. They lead their horses quietly, eyes lowered. No one speaks above a whisper. The women, radiant in solemn, stand waiting. The leader lifts her staff once more and declares, "The womb has spoken." The storm continues, and just like that, the hierarchy resets. The men take up their duties again, the women fade into the background, and the world resumes its relentless motion. But you know what you've seen cannot be unseen. The Empire's heart does not beat in the saddle or the sword. It beats here, in the hands that cradle infants and decide futures. The Mongols called themselves children of the sky, but it's the mothers who taught them to breathe. As light falls, you sit alone beneath the stars. The rain has stopped, but the air still trembles with its memory. You think about how every empire is really a story of mothers, some loud, some silent, all carrying the weight of creation disguised as obedience. The wind shifts again, carrying faint laughter from the tents. You close your eyes and imagine it spreading across the endless plains, mingling with the echoes of hooves and thunder, the eternal chorus of life remaking itself. The storm sleeps, but it will wake again. The moon rises over the grasslands like a pale wound, and for the first time since you began travelling with the Empire, you sense the quiet between generations. The camps are settled, the horses fed, the warriors asleep. Only a few torches flicker at the outskirts, where the healers and midwives work through the night. The air hums faintly with whispers, not of war or harvest, but of something far stranger, plans for those who have not yet drawn breath. We follow the sound of those voices to a cluster of yurts built in a circle, their tops painted with swirling white and red designs that shimmer in the firelight. An old man sits outside the largest one, carving symbols into a wooden tablet. His hair is long, silver, and braided into loops around his ears. He looks up at you and smiles frankly. "You've seen the mothers," he says. "Now you must see the law that guides them." "This," he explains, "is the Terold Sasan, the code of the unborn, a collection of decrees written not on paper but on memory and blood." You hesitate before entering, unsure whether it's meant for outsiders, but the old man nods. "You walk among us," he says. "You should understand how we choose the ones who will walk after us." Inside, the yurt is dim, lit only by a ring of butter lamps. Around the walls hang strips of cured leather inscribed with tiny runes, each symbol marking a generation. A group of women and elders sit cross-legged on rugs, their hands folded, their expressions grave. In the center lies a low table covered in small clay figurines, tiny human shapes no larger than a child's fist. Some are intact, some are broken. You feel your skin prickle. The eldest woman, her voice like dry reeds, speaks softly. We do not wait for life to decide itself. We tell it what to be. The ceremony begins. A midwife brings forward a bowl of milk mixed with ash. One by one, the elders dip their fingers and mark the tiny figurines. Each stroke corresponds to a trait: courage, patience, endurance, coming, beauty, silence. As they paint, they chant quietly, the words rhythmic and hypnotic. Bone of storm, heart of stone, mind of sky. When one figurine is finished, it is placed on a flat stone slab. If the milk runs evenly down its body, the elders nod. Strong spirit, they whisper. If it pours or dries in blotches, the figurine is smashed. You watch the process with morbid fascination. These are charms, you tell yourself, just symbols. But then you notice that each broken figurine's name is carefully crossed off a list written in soot on a sheepskin scroll. The names belong to expectant mothers. You begin to understand. The code of the unborn isn't metaphor, it's selection. The elders keep track of pregnancies throughout the empire. Every moon, reports arrive from the midwives of each tribe, notes about the mother's dreams, cravings, moods, even the direction of the wind at conception. These details are all weighed against omens, determining whether the unborn child is favoured or uncertain. The uncertain ones are watched closely. If misfortune strikes, a fire, a drought, a lost battle, the family may be told that the sky reclaims its promise. Historians still argue about how systematic this process was. Some claim it was superstition woven into folk medicine. Others, more disturbingly, suggest it amounted to prenatal selection, a cultural form of eugenics justified by religion. But can't tell which is worse: the possibility that they believed it sincerely, or that they calculated it coldly. The ceremony continues. A young woman steps forward, visibly pregnant. She kneels before the elders and lowers her head. One of them, a man with a shaman's necklace of bone, asks her to describe her dreams. I see rivers, she says softly, and wolves drinking from them. The elders exchange glances. A boy, the man says. He will wander. The woman nods, relief washing over her face. He will live, one of the elders adds, and the others echo. He will live. A clay figurine is marked with a crescent and set aside. Then another woman approaches, trembling. My dreams are of falling trees, she whispers. The room goes still. The sky is cutting the roots, an elder murmurs. A faint sigh passes through the circle. Without a word, the figurine with her name is broken in half. The woman bows her head, silent. No one comforts her. The fire pops and the sound fills the silence like thunder in miniature. Later, outside the old man again. He sits by the fire stirring a pot of tea. You think this is cruel, he says quietly. But you must understand, our land does not forgive weakness. The sky takes what it must. Ryomi listens sooner. You stare into the fire. What happens to the ones the sky reclaims? He looks at you for a long moment before answering. Sometimes they're born anyway, he says, and sometimes they vanish before the first cry. His eyes drift toward the horizon. The mothers decide. The words twist like cold iron in your stomach. Historians still debate whether this code was enforced by decree or by social expectation. Some records describe entire villages where every family followed the same lunar calendar of conception and birth. Others suggest it was more symbolic, a mythic way of explaining high infant mortality on the steppe. But the consistency of the practice hints at structure. You can feel the grim efficiency behind it. You wander through the camp as night deepens. The wind carries the smell of milk, fire, and rain. In the distance, you hear faint singing, the same lullaby you've heard in so many places now. The melody repeats like the empire itself, endless, cyclical, soft and cruel. You stop at a tent where a group of young mothers sit by the fire. They're laughing quietly, nursing their babies. One hums a tune while another sharpens a knife, its blade catching the firelight. You ask what they're doing. She smiles and says, preparing the cord cutters. The cord cutters are ceremonial blades, used to sever the umbilical cord after birth. Each is engraved with the symbol of the mother's clan. Odon, the old healer from before, once told you that the act of cutting was not only physical but moral. You cut fear, you cut doubt, you cut all weakness from the blood, she'd said. Watching these women now, you realize how literal that philosophy is. Every detail of reproduction, timing, diet, even emotion, is ritualized, controlled, weaponized. The Mongols have turned motherhood into governance. You sit beside them as they speak about their dreams for their children. One hopes her daughter will ride without falling. Another prays her son will never weep, even in sleep. None mention kindness, or peace, or joy. Those are luxuries the steppe cannot afford. Later you are invited to a smaller tent where the shamans keep their books. Long leather scrolls painted with ink made from soot and milk. Their genealogical diagrams mixed with prophecy. Lines branch outward like rivers, each ending in a symbol, a hawk for warriors, a stag for herders, a serpent for healers. The shamans trace these lines when advising on marriages. You run your fingers along one of the scrolls and notice something odd. Some lines are deliberately cut short with a red mark, as if erased. The shaman beside you notices and says softly, "Those are the lines that should not return." He enrolls another section, newer, unmarked. "These are waiting," he says, "the unborn yet to come." The sky writes them through us. You realize this empire doesn't simply record history, it edits it, like a manuscript written in flesh. A strange tidbit survives from a Persian observer who claimed Mongol shamans could predict the gender and temperament of a child based on the shape of a mother's belly and the pitch of her voice. Modern scholars scoff, but here you see the system behind the superstition. Every observation, every myth serves the same purpose: control the future before it exists. The old man from earlier joins you again, carrying a clay cup of kumis. "You think we are cruel," he says, "but cruelty is just clarity seen too soon." He looks toward the eastern sky where a faint glow hints at dawn. "The world breaks those who do not prepare. We only break the ones who cannot endure." You sip the drink. It burns, sour and alive. You understand what he means, even if you wish you didn't. Historians still argue about how far this prenatal selection extended. Some even suggest the Mongols practiced early forms of genetic isolation, avoiding unions between families that produced too many stillbirths or deformities. If true, it would make them pioneers of hereditary management centuries before Mendel, long before Darwin. But they didn't need science to justify it. They had the sky. The dawn finally comes, washing the camp in light. The code of the unborn is complete for another season. The elders extinguish the lamps, roll up the scrolls, and hang the surviving figurines and strings above the yurt entrances. The broken ones are buried quietly beneath stones, faces turned to the east. As the mothers emerge, they look neither joyous nor sorrowful. They are simply resolute. You watch one young woman stop at the burial mound. She kneels, places her hand on the earth, and whispers something. Then she stands and walks away, face calm. The steppe wind rises, tugging at her hair. For a moment, it sounds almost like a sigh. You turn toward the horizon and think of how the Mongols once dreamed of conquering the world. Maybe they already have, just not through swords, but through selection. Every birth, every death, every decision is part of a design larger than any empire, an algorithm written in milk and fire. You whisper to yourself, they don't just rule the living, they rule the yet-to-be. And as the first rays of sunlight cut across the plains, you realize the empire doesn't end with its people. It continues through possibility itself. The future for them isn't something that happens, it's something manufactured. By the time the next moon waxes full, the steppe has turned silver again, endless and glimmering. You wake to the sound of low horns, the signal that cuts through the cold dawn like a blade. Men, women and children are gathering outside the western boundary of the camp. You sense anticipation in the air, a quiet fever, an undercurrent of ceremony. A boy tells you simply, "Today we choose the herd." At first you assume it's about horses again, breeding season perhaps. But when you see the tents arranged in a long semicircle, the decorated banners, the fires burning in neat rows, you realize this is something far more serious. It isn't just about animals, it's about humans. The same instincts that perfected the horse are now being turned inward, directed toward the Empire's own flesh. The ceremony is called Tengrian Urel, the breeding of heaven's herd. It happens only once every few years, when the elders decide the balance of strength, beauty and endurance in the tribes must be renewed. The Mongols believe that humanity, like livestock, needs pruning and guiding. The sky does not intervene directly. It acts through the careful hands of those who understand its will. The gathering resembles a festival at first glance. Music, food and laughter. But beneath it is an undercurrent of judgment. The strongest young men and women of each clan are presented before the elders. They wear plain garments, no jewelry, no weapons. Nothing must distract from the flesh itself. An older, with hair white as bone, walks among them, tapping his staff on the ground. "Do not look away," he says. "Do not hide what the sky has made." One by one the youths are examined. Posture, hands, teeth, even the clarity of the eyes. Each inspection feels ritualistic yet oddly scientific. You remember the earlier generations, the mothers marking their infants with symbols, the children trained in silence, the soldiers shaped by pain. Now here the system culminates. The best of those bloodlines are paired by decree. The shaman with a wolf pelt hood holds up a scroll. "The sky's combinations," she announces, born of dream and sign. Her voice carries across the field. Names are read aloud, 2 at a time. When a pair is chosen, they step forward, touch foreheads, and exchange a shallow breath, sealing their union. There are no protests. The Empire does not arrange marriages for affection, it arranges them for design. A curious fragment from a 13th century Chinese record describes this very ritual. They wed like falcons, swiftly, by order of the keeper. The observer had meant it as an insult, but standing here, you see the grim genius of it. The Mongols have turned reproduction into policy, pairing bloodlines the way they breed horses, by temperament, endurance and ancestry. One girl, barely 16, is chosen to pair with a seasoned warrior nearly twice her age. Her expression remains serene. A mother behind her whispers proudly, "He carries iron in his breath. She will give him sons of steel." The pairing isn't random. The warrior is famed for surviving 5 winters in the mountains without frostbite, and the girl's mother once birthed twins during a snowstorm. To the Mongols, this is divine arithmetic. You can't help but notice how the shaman's list reads more like a breeding chart than a wedding registry. Wolf line with eagle line, hawk with stag, fire with ice. Each pairing aims to balance elements, strength with cunning, endurance with fertility. It's an ecosystem of flesh engineered for survival. Historians still argue whether this ritual was enforced empire-wide or localized to elite clans. Some claim it existed only in myth, a symbolic reflection of their pragmatic marriages. Yet the consistency of reports across Persian, Chinese and Arab sources suggests otherwise. The Mongols, it seems, truly treated humanity as livestock for heaven's design. We watch as the chosen couples are led to the riverbank. They kneel, hands joined, while a priest sprinkles water mixed with milk over their heads. "The sky binds you," he says. "Breed not for love, but for legacy." The words are chilling in their precision. Afterward, the new pairs are taken to separate tents, where they will spend the night under supervision. There's no pretense of romance, only duty. "We give the sky what it asks," a young man murmurs when you ask how he feels. "Our pleasure is in obedience." You remember the house of flesh and bone, the silent experiments, the code of the unborn. Each of these rituals was a chapter in the same manual, the Empire's guide to shaping the perfect creature. Now, watching these couples walk silently into the starlight, you realize this is the final page. Yet there's more beneath the surface. Later, as the fires die down, you wander beyond the camp and find another gathering, a smaller, quieter one. Here, the rejected stand in shadow. Those not chosen for pairing are separated, their names marked with a red circle on the shaman's scroll. Some are too small, too frail, or born of questionable lineage. Others simply unlucky. Inalda explains, without cruelty, the sky loves balance. Not all can breed. You ask what happens to them. He shrugs. Some serve as teachers, some as riders, some vanish. His tone is calm, almost matter of fact. It's not execution, it's exclusion. To the Mongols, being denied the right to reproduce is the same as fading from the future. If historians centuries later would call this a proto-eugenic caste system. But standing here, you realize it's more intimate than that. These people believe they are caretakers of heaven's herd, shepherds of blood. Their compassion is not for individuals, but for the species itself. At the centre of the darkened field, the wolf-hooded shaman begins another ritual for the unchosen. She lights a small fire, adds herbs that smell sharp and sweet, and throws in strands of horsehair. The smoke rises in twisting shapes. She chants softly, "Return to wind, return to seed, return to silence." The unchosen bow their heads. Some weep quietly, others smile. You wonder how many will truly vanish before the next moon. A Persian captive once wrote that the Mongols' greatest strength was not their cruelty, but their acceptance of necessity. Watching this, you understand what he meant. To them, life is livestock, emotion is luxury, and mercy is inefficiency. As dawn approaches, the chosen couples return from their tents. They are greeted with cheers and laughter. Each woman carries a small silver ring tied to a strip of horsehide, the seal of breath. It signifies that she has fulfilled her first duty. When a child is conceived, another ring will be added. Some women wear entire chains by middle age, a visible record of loyalty to the sky's command. A shaman steps forward holding a newborn from the previous season. The first foal of the storm, she declares. The crowd bows their heads. The child, wrapped in wolf fur, does not cry. Instead, it stares wide-eyed at the fire, utterly still. A strong one, the shaman says proudly. He remembers the cold. You notice the way everyone looks at the child, not with affection, but with reverence. He is not a person yet. He is a vessel for potential. Later, as the sun climbs, the new unions depart to their respective camps. The field empties, leaving behind trampled grass and burnt milk on the earth. The wolf-hooded shaman approaches you one last time. You look troubled, she says. You hesitate. Do you never fear what you're creating? Her smile is tired but unflinching. Fear? No, the sky does not fear the storm it sends. She looks toward the horizon, where clouds gather like herds in the distance. We are the hooves of that storm. Historians still argue whether this ritual was the height of Mongol innovation or the beginning of their decline. Some claim that once breeding replaced battle as the measure of greatness, the empire's spirit softened. Others say it was the ultimate expression of their worldview, a biological empire that no sword could destroy. Perhaps both are true. That night, you sleep by the river. The wind howls through the reeds, and in the distance you hear the faint rhythmic sound of drums, the celebration continuing far beyond your sight. In your dreams, the world itself becomes a herd, countless hooves pounding across time, guided by unseen riders. And over it all, the endless voice of the sky whispering the same word again and again. Breed, breed, breed. When you wake at dawn, the field is empty. Only hoofprints remain, stretching toward the horizon. You realize that the empire never truly stops moving. It simply reproduces its momentum. And as the rising sun paints the plains gold, you understand that this endless propagation of flesh and faith is the Mongols' truest conquest. They didn't just inherit the world, they rewrote what it meant to be alive within it. By now, you have travelled with them long enough that the boundaries between ritual and daily life have blurred. The empire breathes in patterns. Every act, eating, sleeping, fighting, birthing, feeds back into its cycle of selection. You begin to see the pattern everywhere, in the smallest gestures, a mother straightening her child's spine while he drinks, a blacksmith examining his apprentice's wrists before handing him a hammer, a herdsman whistling in exact rhythm with his horse's gait. The Mongols are not just living, they are calibrating. Tonight, the air smells of iron and rain. You walk through the largest mobile city you have ever seen. Tens of thousands of yurts arranged like a constellation on the plains. Smoke rises from each chimney in spirals so perfectly aligned that it looks intentional. And in a sense, it is. The shamans insist that even smoke must rise in harmony. If the smoke bends wrong, one tells you, the heart bends with it. At the camp's centre stands the great forge, a massive circular structure of clay and stone, fed by 20 fires. From a distance it looks like a volcano crouched on the steppe. Sparks drift upward like red stars. This is where the Empire makes its weapons, its armour, and, symbolically, its destiny. The air inside is blistering. The blacksmiths, bare-chested and soot-streaked, move like dancers, their motions perfectly timed to the rhythm of hammers. But the forge is not just a workplace. It's another classroom, in the endless schooling of flesh. Strike with breath, not arm, a master shouts. The metal will feel you. The apprentices obey, breathing in before each hammerfall, exhaling as they strike. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, almost musical. You realize this is another form of conditioning. Even crafting becomes synchronization training. Historians still argue whether this breathsmithing was superstition of practical metallurgy. Some claim the timed breathing kept smiths from fatigue and improved focus. Others dismiss it as ritual nonsense. But watching it now, you understand the deeper purpose. It's about rhythm, the Empire's unspoken theology. If everything moves to the same beat, nothing fractures. In the far corner, young women work on what look like bone carvings. The pieces are small and intricate, shaped into animals, faces, runes. When you ask what they're for, one girl smiles faintly. "For the children yet to be," she says. "They will hold these when they sleep. The shape teaches them strength. You pick one up, it's a wolf, its jaws slightly open, its ribs exaggerated. The carving feels alive in your palm." The Mongols treat their symbols as instructions. The wolf means endurance, the stag means patience, the hawk means sight. Every image, every story is an algorithm for behavior, imprinted early and reinforced forever. As the night deepens, a procession begins. The Khan's banners are raised, black horsehair whipping in the wind. The people fall silent as a column of riders approaches from the east. At their head rides the Empire's chief biologist, not that he would ever call himself that. To his people, he is the keeper of bones, master of vitality, guardian of sinew. His name is Hawk-Chin. He dismounts and walks straight to the forge, carrying a sealed jar made of horn. He sets it on the ground before the master blacksmith and announces, "The heart of 1,000 riders." When the jar is opened, the stench hits you first: salt, blood, decay. Inside are preserved hearts from fallen warriors. They are to be burned tonight. Their smoke released strengthen the unborn. The blacksmith nods solemnly. "Fire purifies flesh," he says. The ceremony begins. The hearts are fed into the forge one by one. The air fills with thick, dark smoke, heavy with the smell of iron and ash. The crowd hums a low note that vibrates through your ribs. "Breath of the fallen," they chant. "Feed the living." You stand among them, the heat suffocating, and suddenly you understand. The Empire doesn't believe in death. It believes in conversion. Every life ends only to become another's breath. A scholar centuries later would write that the Mongols saw matter and spirit as interchangeable. Watching this, you see it's not philosophy, it's logistics. The entire civilization functions like a living organism recycling its own tissue. Nothing is wasted, not even flesh. When the last heart is burned, the forge master takes a single piece of glowing metal from the coals and plunges it into a vat of coolness. Steam explodes upward, releasing a sour, sweet smell. He holds up the quenched blade, milk dripping from it like blood. "The sword has drunk the herd," he declares. The crowd cheers softly, almost reverently. Later, when the fires dim, Kokchin invites you to his tent. Inside, shelves are lined with jars, bones, tendons, preserved organs. It looks like a morgue crossed with a library. He gestures for you to sit. "You think we are beasts," he says calmly, "but we are gardeners." He opens one jar and holds up what looks like a dried tendon. "Do you know what this is?" he asks. "A horse's leg," he gasps. He nods. "It carried a rider for 10 winters. When the horse died, we studied it. We measured its fibers, its stretch. We learned how strength hides in flexibility. Then we taught that to our soldiers." You blink. "Taught them," he smiles faintly. "We trained them to move as the tendon does. Taut, but never rigid. It sounds absurd, and yet you've seen their arches twist and lean like grass in the wind. Unbreakable because they refuse to resist." Kokchin pours you a drink from a small clay flask. "We take lessons from everything that survives," he continues. "Bone, ice, blood, even wind." He leans forward. "Do you know how many generations it takes to perfect a horse?" You shake your head. 7, he says. "Do you know how many to perfect a man?" You hesitate. "You think perfection is possible?" His eyes gleam. not possible, required. The sky demands it. He gestures toward the shelves. Each jar is a lesson, each death a teacher. When we learn what survives, we become immortal. There's no arrogance in this term, just calm conviction, the kind that comes from generations of belief turned into habit. Historians still argue whether the Mongols practiced what we would call experimental biology. Some say they simply preserved relics for spiritual reasons. Others believe they conducted genuine anatomical study, observing how bones healed, how wounds closed, how diets changed physiques. The empire's survival through famine, plague and cold seems to suggest the latter. You wander outside after midnight. The forge is cooled, the fires glowing like buried suns. The air smells of milk and metal. A group of apprentices sits nearby, their hands resting on their chests in meditation. One whispers softly, "We breathe what they burned." The line chills you because it's true. The air feels dense, as if carrying particles of all those hearts reduced to smoke. You lie down on the grass and stare up at the stars. They seem closer than ever, shimmering like shards of steel. The Mongols call them Tengri's eyes. They believe each star watches over a lineage, marking every success and failure. When a star falls, Kokchin had said, it means a bloodline has finished its purpose. Somewhere a comet cuts across the sky, a streak of white fire. The people around you murmur prayers, not in fear, but in acceptance. The sky harvests its own, someone whispers. You realize that in this worldview, even extinction has utility. Nothing is tragic, only necessary. The next morning the entire camp moves. The forges are dismantled, the jars sealed, the fires smothered. You watch in awe at the efficiency of it. Within hours the city is gone, leaving only blackened circles in the grass. The land looks as though it is healed over its own wounds. As the caravans roll west, you ride beside Kokchin. He seems contemplative. You've seen what we build, he says, but do you know why? You stay silent. He glances at you. Because the world forgets too easily. We breed memory into bodies. A man may forget his father's name, but his sinews remember how his ancestors rode. The sky remembers through muscle. It's a startling idea that heritage isn't just story, but muscle memory encoded across generations. Every callus, every reflex, every instinct, each is an archive of survival. You think of modern science, of epigenetics, of trauma passed down through generations. The Mongols didn't have the vocabulary for it, but they seem to know it intuitively. Their empire isn't just cultural, it's biological memory in motion. By dusk the caravan reaches a new plain. The grass ripples like silver fear, the horizon endless. The people stop to rest, fires are lit again. The rhythm resumes. You realize that no matter how far they travel, the empire never loses shape. It's alive, moving, breathing, an organism the size of continents. And as the wind rises, carrying smoke and song into the night, you understand that this endless adaptation is their true immortality. They're not trying to conquer time. They're trying to synchronize with it. The stars wheel above. The drums beat faintly in the distance. The smoke from the last forge drifts upward, merging with the sky's vastness until you can no longer tell which breath belongs to which world. You close your eyes and feel your heartbeat steady, your breath sinking with theirs. For a moment you too are part of that living empire of sinew and smoke. And in that moment you understand that their secret was never cruelty or conquest, it was continuity. The empire doesn't live in cities or armies, it lives in rhythm. The next leg of your journey begins under a low metallic sky. The air feels strange, neither warm nor cold, as if holding its breath. The Mongol army has stopped for the season, setting up a vast encampment near a frozen river. Smoke rises in perfect columns, just as before, but there's a new sound tonight, the scratching of quills. Thousands of them. You wander through rows of yurts to find the source, expecting priests or scribes recording tax ledgers or battle plans. Instead, you find old men and women hunched over parchment, tracing line after line of connected names. Not soldiers, not generals, but genealogists. The empire, it seems, has paused not for rest but for reflection. A young boy with ink-stained fingers explains. The great counting. Every few winters the Mongols stop moving long enough to update their genealogical records. It's an empire-wide census, not of wealth or land, but of blood. The shaman princes believe the sky must always know its own children. If they lose track of the lineage, they lose its blessing. Inside one of the largest tents, a vast map stretches across the floor. It's not a map of territory, but of kinship. Lines and circles and symbols spreading outward from a single point labelled Temujin, the birth name of Genghis Khan. The closer a mark is to that name, the higher its bearer's status. It's both holy diagram and social algorithm. You kneel at the edge of it, tracing the lines with your eyes. This is how they rule, you think, not through walls or armies, but through ancestry. Every loyalty, every marriage, every act of defiance is recorded in this map of flesh. A scholar sitting nearby notices your curiosity. He's an old man with a sparse beard and sharp eyes. "We do not draw land," he says softly. "We draw life." He gestures to the network of lines. Here, blood is the only border. You ask how they keep such vast records. The man smiles. With memory, he taps his temple, and with whispers. Indeed, you soon learn that every clan carries its own oral archivists, men and women who can recite their ancestry back dozens of generations. They memorize not just names, but details, eye color, date, temperament, victories, defeats. Some can even recount the songs sung during a particular ancestor's birth or death. Historians still argue whether such feats of memory were possible or embellished by later writers, but even the most skeptical concede that the Mongols treated lineage like architecture, something to be built, reinforced, and occasionally torn down. You watch as two archivists debate the placement of a single name. One insists the warrior in question was descended from a sacred clan, while the other claims his blood was mixed with foreign storms. The argument grows heated until an elder intervenes, holding up a bronze disc engraved with ancient symbols. "Let the wind decide," she says. The tent flap opens. The night air rushes in. They toss a pinch of ashes into the wind. The direction it drifts determines the verdict. When it blows west, the elder nods. The sky claims him as kin. The name stays. You realize the Empire's bureaucracy is half science, half superstition, and somehow it works. But beneath this meticulous record-keeping lies a darker undertone. The genealogists are not merely tracking descent, they are policing it. Those whose bloodlines wander too far are quietly reassigned to labour divisions or frontier settlements. The phrase whispered for such cases is windborne, a poetic euphemism for dilution. You hear of entire families relocated overnight after a single disputed ancestry mark. The sky cannot favour those who forget their roots, the elders say. It's a warning wrapped in reverence. A peculiar tidbit from a Persian chronicler mentions that Mongol scribes could recite the descendants of Genghis Khan by heart, as a priest knows the Psalms. He called it mad devotion. Yet standing among them, you sense it's less madness than survival. To forget your lineage here is to lose existence itself. One evening you are invited to sit with a group of genealogists as they cross-verify the scrolls. The process is dizzying. Each name is spoken aloud, its birth sign and parentage confirmed, its feats and flaws acknowledged. When a mistake is found, a repeated ancestor, a missing generation, it's corrected by consensus, not erasure. The sky does not punish error, one explains, only forgetting. You ask what happens to those with no lineage at all, the orphans, the conquered, the outsiders. The tent grows quiet. Finally, an old woman answers. They are given one. She explains that the Mongols have a practice called kalong tur, the adoption of the wind. When an outsider proves their worth, a council assigns them an ancestral fiction, folding them into an existing line as if they had always been there. The sky hates empty space, she says, so we fill it. It's both merciful and manipulative, you realize. By rewriting a person's past, the Empire ensures their loyalty to its future. The more you learn, the more it feels like standing inside a living archive. The camp itself is structured like a genealogical chart, each yurt placed according to family ties, the outer rings occupied by servants and soldiers, the inner core by elders and shamans. Even the roads between tents resemble branching lines. Late one night, as snow begins to fall, you follow a faint sound to a small yurt near the edge of camp. Inside, a boy sits alone, tracing circles in the dirt. His eyes are pale, almost colourless. "I'm not in the map," he says quietly. You kneel beside him. "What do you mean?" "My father was windborn," he replies. My mother says the sky hasn't decided if I exist. He presses his palm into the dirt, leaving a small print. So I make my own map. The innocence of it cuts through you like cold air. Later you tell the genealogist what the boy said. The old man nods sadly. There will always be those the sky overlooks, he says. But sometimes the overlooked become its favourite. He leans closer, voice dropping. Even the Khan's line began in shadow. Do not forget that. Historians still debate whether Genghis himself invented these systems or inherited them from older steppe traditions. Some argue the obsession with genealogy arose later, as his descendants fought over succession. Others believe it was always central, a way to bind nomads into a single organism. Whatever its origin, the result is astonishing. An empire that remembers itself through blood. You begin noticing echoes of this mindset everywhere. Soldiers greet one another not with friend or brother, but with bone sharer. Traders mark contracts with drops of their own blood. Even musicians tune their instruments to rhythms said to match the Khan's heartbeat. The entire civilization operates as a genetic chorus, each note a strand of inheritance. And yet, beneath the harmony you sense unease. One morning, a rumour spreads that a branch of the royal line has gone rotten, too many unions with foreign blood. The response is swift. The camp's shamans convene, holding mirrors to the faces of each accused noble. The eyes will tell, they whisper. Those whose reflections shimmer unevenly are declared impure. You expect punishment, but instead they are simply exiled. They will find new wind, an elder explains. If it favours them, they may return in 7 years. You later learn that some of these exiles founded new tribes in distant lands, carrying fragments of the empire's code with them. And centuries later, when modern geneticists trace the Y chromosome lineage across Eurasia, they find a single pattern, one that appears in millions of men from the Caspian to the Pacific. It all leads back here, to this empire, to this camp, to this moment. You imagine those exiles carrying their blood like embers across the world, each spark igniting another generation. When you share this thought with the old genealogist, he smiles faintly. Then the sky's plan worked, he says. The wind carried our name farther than our horses ever could. He pauses, staring into the fire. But remember, wind can scatter as easily as it spreads. As he speaks, a gust blows through the tent, extinguishing the flame for an instant. In the darkness, you hear only the scratching of quills, thousands of lives being rewritten in ink and memory. You realize the empire has achieved something astonishing. It has turned genealogy into governance, reproduction into policy, memory into immortality. And yet, you can't help but wonder, what happens when a people become so obsessed with lineage that they forget the individual entirely? Outside, the snow thickens, erasing footprints as fast as they're made. You stand at the edge of the frozen river, watching the flakes swirl like ash. For a moment, the world feels weightless, suspended between past and future. Somewhere behind you, a scribe calls out, "Another child born." The crowd cheers softly. A new name is added to the map, another link in the infinite chain. You think of the boy without a line, tracing his own circles in the dirt. His map won't survive the sow, but maybe that's the point. Not every history is meant to be recorded. Some are meant to vanish quietly, carried away by the wind, and as you turn away, the flakes catch in your hair, melting instantly against your skin. You can almost believe they're whispering something, a genealogy of snow, written and erased in the same breath. The empire continues its counting, its recording, its rewriting. The quills scratch on, relentless as hooves. And above it all, the wind moves softly, eternally, reminding you that even the greatest lineages are only temporary patterns drawn across an infinite sky. The world feels older now. The empire, stretched across half the earth, grieves with the weary majesty of a predator that has eaten too much. Its heart still beats, steady and broken, but slower, heavier. You feel it in the wind itself, the way it no longer bites as sharply as before, the way its howls sound less like hunger and more like memory. It's late autumn. The grass has gone yellow, the sky pale as bone. You walk among the camps one last time, tracing a world that seems both eternal and fading. The horse herds still graze in perfect formation. The tents still form their concentric circles of authority, yet something intangible has shifted. The rhythm of creation that once drove them, the breeding, the burning, the endless forging of bodies and bloodlines, now hums at a lower frequency. You sense exhaustion. the kind that comes not from defeat but from fulfillment. The Empire has reached its apex, and even perfection needs rest. Tonight they call it the long sleep of the steppe, a ritual of quiet held once in a generation when the tribes pause expansion and reflect upon their own making. It's not celebrated with fire or song, but with silence, a silence so vast it feels physical pressing against your ears. You stand at the edge of the camp, watching smoke rise in gentle, twisting ribbons. No horns, no drums. Even the horses are still. The air smells of snow and milk and faint ash, as if all their histories have been simmered down into one final breath. An old woman, Adonagem, the midwife who seemed to appear at every turn of this story, sits beside you. Her hands rest on her knees, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's ending," she says softly. You ask what she means. "Everything," she replies. "Not the world, not yet, just the chasing." You realize she's right. For centuries, these people have pursued something invisible, the perfect body, the perfect herd, the perfect storm. Now that pursuit has circled back on itself. The offspring of warriors are now scholars of bloodlines. The shamans have become administrators of genetics. They have succeeded so completely that there's nowhere left to climb. It's strange, an empire built on motion now forced to learn stillness. Odon hands you a cup of kumis. The sky sleeps tonight, and it expects company. You sit with her as the light fades. Around you, the camp begins to dim its lamps one by one, until only the stars remain. For the first time in your long journey, the steppe is utterly dark. And in that darkness, you feel the pulse of something vast and ancient, like the heartbeat of the land itself. The people start to lie down, not in their tents but in the open. Thousands of them, side by side, wrapped in furs. You hear no words, no laughter, just the occasional rustle of cloth, the creak of leather. A living sea of sleepers beneath the endless sky. It's a sight that steals your breath. You feel like you're witnessing not a camp, but a continent dreaming. A shaman passes among the resting bodies, sprinkling powdered milk onto the ground. Each pinch lands softly, melting into the soil. To feed the ancestors, he whispers, to remind them we are still breathing. You notice how each person sleeps in alignment with the stars above, an ancient custom, Odon explains. When the sky dreams, we must face its eyes, she says. Otherwise it forgets we exist. It's poetic. It's poetic, but also chilling. The Empire's obsession with memory hasn't vanished, it's only transformed. Now, instead of recording bloodlines, they're recording stillness, the geometry of sleep itself. Somewhere nearby, you hear a child's voice murmuring in her dreams. She repeats a phrase you've heard before in songs and ceremonies. We are the wind that remembers. It loops softly, fading into the night. You think about all the rituals you've witnessed. The breeding, the training, the burning of hearts, the genealogies written in ink and bone. All of it led here, to this moment of collective rest. The Empire has built its immortality not through conquest, but through self-replication. Every person alive carries its rhythm, its myth, its code. And now the organism sleeps. Historians still argue about this period. Some call it the Pax Mongolica, the age when the steppes quieted and the empire stabilized under trade and diplomacy. Others see it as the beginning of decay, a pause before collapse. But here, among these silent sleepers, it doesn't feel like decline. It feels like metamorphosis. Ardon leans closer, whispering as if afraid to wake the earth. They think the sky's resting, she says, but really, it's waiting. You glance at her, puzzled. She smiles faintly. The sky never ends anything, it just changes the game. You lie back beside her, eyes open to the stars. The constellations are sharper tonight, more vivid than you've ever seen. You spot the familiar patterns the Mongols revere, the wolf, the hawk, the horse, the mother of storms. Each one gleams like a sigil of history. You imagine them watching, approving, perhaps even dreaming along. The cold deepens. Your breath fogs the air, joining the thousands of others rising around you. For a moment, it feels like the entire empire is exhaling at once, a vast sigh across centuries. And then you begin to hear it, faint at first but growing, a low hum that vibrates through the ground. It's not coming from drums or wind, but from the sleepers themselves. A chorus of synchronized breathing, perfectly timed, perfectly pitched. The same rhythm that once guided their forges, their marches, their births. Now it returns as lullaby. You close your eyes, and in that hum, you can hear their entire story. The thunder of hooves, the cries of newborns, the clash of swords, the laughter of children running through grass taller than themselves. It's all there, layered and intertwined, like the verses of a single, endless song. A thought flickers through your mind. Perhaps the empire was never about domination at all. Perhaps it was about rhythm, finding harmony between body and world, chaos and order, birth and death. In their relentless quest to control the future, they accidentally discovered how to rest within it. The night stretches on. The stars wheel slowly overhead. You drift between wakefulness and dream, carried by the tide of their collective breathing. And in that half-dream you see the empire differently. You see it not as armies and banners, but as an idea suspended in the air, an organism woven of flesh and wind, capable of both cruelty and transcendence. The steppe is no longer land, but bloodstream, and its rivers are veins pulsing with the memory of every rider, every mother, every shaman who ever lived. You see the mothers dancing in the rain again, their laughter echoing like thunder. You see the smiths hammering to the rhythm of their own hearts. You see the genealogists whispering names into eternity. And above them all, you see the sky, not as a god or judge, but as a mirror, reflecting back everything they ever were. When you wake, dawn has broken. The air is still, the camp blanketed in frost. The people rise slowly, stretching, murmuring soft greetings. The silence is lifted. The empire has exhaled. You walk among them as they rekindle fires and feed horses, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet something in their eyes has changed. The rest has done its work. They move with quiet purpose, renewed but calmer, less desperate. Odon nods toward the horizon. It begins again, she says simply. You ask what does. She smiles. Everything. Historians still debate whether this so-called sleep was literal or symbolic, a mythic description of winter camp life, or a spiritual rite of hibernation. But those who survived it spoke of waking with new clarity, of hearing the sky's voice in the wind. They said it whispered one phrase, repeated endlessly, "You are the storm, and the storm never ends." You watch as the camp begins to move, tents packed, carts loaded, fires doused. The silence is replaced by motion once more. Children laugh, horses snort. The wind returns with its familiar sharpness. Yet beneath it all lingers that hum, a steady pulse of continuity. You mount your horse and ride to the edge of the steppe. Behind you stretches the empire's endless expanse, shimmering beneath the pale sun. You know it will outlive you, not as a nation but as a rhythm imprinted on the bones of generations. And as you look back one last time, the steppe seems to breathe. The smoke from 1,000 chimneys rises and twists together, forming for a heartbeat the shape of a vast sleeping figure before dissolving into the sky. The empire sleeps again, not in weakness, but in knowing that every breath, every child, every dream will carry it forward long after its tents are gone. You turn your horse west and ride into the wind. The air tastes of milk, ash, and eternity. Now, slow your breathing. The story has travelled far, hasn't it? The steppe is quiet now. The fires have gone cold, and even the horses seem to sigh as they settle. You can almost feel the earth under your fingertips, smooth, chilled, endless. The empire you've walked through still lingers somewhere between your heartbeat and the whispering wind outside your window. You've seen how people once tried to outwit death, to perfect life, to sculpt themselves into something the sky would never forget. But in the end, every empire dreams of rest. Every storm eventually lays itself down. Breathe in and imagine the smell of rain over dry grass. Breathe out and let the echoes of hoofbeats fade. It's just you now, lying where the steppe meets the horizon. The stars above you are the same ones they watched, their light older than any empire. They don't ask for conquest or legacy. They only ask that you look at them and remember you are made of the same things: dust, breath, and quiet fire. The Mongols believed that silence was not emptiness, but fullness, the pause between heartbeats where life hides. So rest there for a moment. Feel the rhythm steady. Feel the storm inside you slow, soften and dissolve. You've travelled far enough tonight. Let the empire fade behind your eyelids. Let the wind become lullaby. The world still turns. The sky still breathes.